Chapter 20. After seeing off the exhausted Marcus, Liszt retracted his thoughts from his memories. Admittedly, an aristocrat's major responsibility was to expand their social network, and the Taro family was one of his important resources. However, he himself was not a diplomatic person. He preferred to stay in his territory, entertain himself, and be self-sufficient. First, I should practice the Qi secret manual and complete the smoke mission. First, he opened the fire fluctuations flames. Through a large number of illustrations and descriptions, it explained how to strengthen fire-attributed Qi, as well as how to circulate Qi in coordination with powerful moves. Fire fluctuations flames tended to be big and wide. Most of its moves spread out in the form of undulations. It belonged to the Group Attack secret manual. Group Attack, it's suitable for charging on the battlefield. However, shouldn't the charge be done by my orders of chivalry? It would be fine for me to command from the rear. While thinking, Liszt opened the Fiery Dragon Drill secret manual. This was a one-on-one secret manual. Its powerful moves were all for one-on-one duels. They were full of lethality, and were somewhat insufficient for charging on the battlefield. However, Liszt quickly decided to practice the Fire Dragon Drill secret manual. Compared to going on the battlefield, he was more worried about assassins. The Fiery Dragon Drill secret manual for one-on-one duels was more suitable than the Fire fluctuations flames secret manual for group attacks. It's decided then. Wait for me to spare some energy, then study the Fire fluctuations flames secret manual. In this world, there were no secret manuals. For Qi cultivation, there were no particularly bad secret manuals, nor were there particularly strong secret manuals. Everything depended on one's talent and understanding. Commoners could produce exceptional experts, but the descendants of experts could also be reduced to mediocrity. In the following time, Liszt practiced the Fiery Dragon Drill secret manual while waiting for the caravan to arrive. In a flash, 3 days had passed. The rain had already stopped. Good news came one after another. The Peanut Settlement's peanut sprite worm was about to mature. Retainer Knight Karl Hammerstein excitedly reported, "Sir, a crack has already opened on the peanut sprite worm's big bud. Inside, a pink peanut sprite worm is about to wake up. Its body has already begun to tremble. Is that so? I'll hurry over." By the time Liszt hurried over on horseback, the flower bud had already bloomed. A pink sprite worm with a sparkling and translucent luster all over its body was crawling on top of the peanut worm stalk with infinite curiosity towards the world. The Peanut Settlement's serfs crowded around, looking at the sprite worm with curiosity and nervousness. Liszt took out the jade powder he carried with him and sprinkled it in front of the peanut worm. The peanut worm sniffed it and quickly began to chew on the jade powder. After a short while, the jade powder on the leaf was finished. The peanut maggot followed the smell and climbed onto Liszt's finger, gnawing on the jade powder on his finger. Then, with a slight pain, the peanut worm had bitten through Liszt's finger. "Come with me, little guy." Liszt placed the sprite worm into a jade box, intending to bring it back to the castle to feed it. As for the worm stalk, it was fine to leave it in the Peanut Settlement. The 5th sprite worm is in hand. With the peanut worm, the Peanut Settlement's bountiful harvest is at hand. Liszt was in a great mood. He could not help but exhort Elder George, take good care of the peanut worm stalk. Do not forget to water and fertilize it. The more fertilizer you spread, the higher the yield of the peanuts. Sir Lord, please be at ease. We will definitely water, weed, and fertilize the peanuts according to your instructions. The peanut worm was collected. Another good thing was about to happen. On the 7th day after Liszt fed it, the flying dust dog pup raised in the castle finally opened its eyes. At first glance, it saw Liszt. It howled and pounced at him, intimately rubbing against his trousers. "Dosen, from now on, you will have to move outside the castle. While holding the leash around Dosun's neck, Liszt called for Thomas. My lord. Thomas, I have a task for you. Feed Dosun for me. By the way, has Dosun's kennel been built? It has been built, my lord. Thomas took the leash and prepared to take Dosun to the kennel. Although Dosun recognized Liszt as its master, it did not mean that it recognized others as its master. When Thomas led it, the flying dust dog pup, which was estimated to be less than a month old, immediately bared its fangs and growled. It ferociously pounced at Thomas, tearing at his shoes. Its bestial nature was very strong. However, Dosun, which still had a mouth full of milk teeth, simply could not tear Thomas's shoes. Take good care of it. My lord, please be at ease. I have experience in raising hounds. Flying dust dogs are much more dangerous than hounds. It has World of Warcraft bloodline. However, it does not matter, it should not go berserk. When it is a bit older, I will train it every day until it is exhausted. Arrangements were made for Dosun's breeder. Liszt climbed to the castle's spire and looked down at the wasteland in a radius of a few kilometers around the castle. He had overlooked the fact that there was land that could be reclaimed around the castle. However, in fact, only a few acres of land on the edge of the castle could be turned into a small garden. The rest of the land was left to grow weeds. Peanut settlement, tomato settlement, shiitake settlement, barley settlement, small barley settlement, dairy farm, flour farm, as well as the town and the castle. In fact, the flour town has 9 settlements. Each settlement has to be put to use. However, without mechanization, and with less than 2,000 people in the flour town, it seems that it really cannot cultivate so much land. Machines could continuously cultivate land, but manpower was very slow. With less than 2,000 people, cultivating more than 10,000 square kilometers of land, which was close to 18 million acres, was indeed frightening. Many of the farmlands were just scattered with seeds and left to fend for themselves. Africa's agriculture is only this much, right? Population, population, only population is the most precious resource. But where am I going to get enough people? It is a bit difficult. Despite the difficulty, Liszt was still very confident that the flour town could develop and grow. As a transmigrator with a cheat, if he couldn't even do this, then he might as well jump off a building and not lose face for transmigrators. Fire Dragon Assault. In the small garden in front of the castle, Liszt held a one-handed sword in his hand and performed a move from the Fire Dragon drill. A flame suddenly ignited on the blade of the sword and spread to a radius of 1 meter with a whistling sound. It was like a fan fanning fire. The flame shot out in all directions and was accompanied by a light crackling sound. The flame was not real, it was just the effect of chi attached to the one-handed sword. Liszt's fire-attributed chi had an explosive nature. Even if it was the same type of chi, it would still have a different emphasis on its nature. For example, fire-attributed chi, his emphasis was on explosive nature, while others might focus on high temperature, fire power, condensation, and so on. I finally mastered the Fire Dragon Assault. Now, I only lack the final move, Heart of Fire Dragon Drill. After I master it, I can get the reward. Liszt was very proud of himself. His talent was still very strong. The Fire Dragon Drill was divided into 2 sets of skills. One set was the method to refine chi, and the other set was the 16 offensive moves. Liszt easily learned the method to operate chi. Now, he was learning the 16 offensive moves. Others take at least half a month to learn a secret manual, but I finished it in less than a week. It is hard to imagine that my predecessor was not able to break through to the Earth Night realm before reaching adulthood. Could it be that his perception was too poor? If his physical talent was not bad, then it could only be attributed to the problem of perception. Before reaching adulthood, Liszt had probably been brainless. Now, Liszt might not dare to say that he was extremely smart, but he was definitely not stupid. Chapter 21. A set of Do-Chi circulation method that introduced how to refine Do-Chi, strengthen Do-Chi, condense Do-Chi, release Do-Chi, and attach Do-Chi. A set of battle techniques that contain 16 moves. 5 body movements: Dragon Rush, Dragon Leap, Dragon Jump, Dragon Fly, Dragon Dive. 5 basic moves: Fire Dragon Pierce, Fire Dragon Strike, Fire Dragon Smash, Fire Dragon Twist, Fire Dragon Drill. 5 fierce moves: Fire Dragon Tail Whip, Fire Dragon Sweep, Fire Dragon Tornado, Fire Dragon Roll, Fire Dragon Ambush. Another ultimate move: Fire Dragon Drill Heart. This was the entirety of the Fire Dragon Drill. The names of each move were very interesting, as though they were part of the same series as his Flaming Dragon Horse. At this moment, List rode on Flaming Dragon Horse. As Flaming Dragon Horse galloped, his body moved up and down, as though he was one with the horse. In his left hand, he held a steel shield in front of him, covering half of Flaming Dragon Horse's body. In his right hand, he held a 3-meter-long Knight Great Spear. On the wasteland near the castle, the grass had already been cut, revealing the yellow color of the earth, barren yellow earth. Flaming Dragon Horse's hooves stepped on the damp ground, leaving behind horse prints of varying depths. Its body turned into a red ball of fire, quickly galloping into the distance. On the horse's back, List's entire body radiated with Do-Chi, which was attached to the shield, Knight Spear, and Flaming Dragon Horse. Very quickly, the man and horse were completely enveloped in flames. Followed by List's loud roar, Fire Dragon Drill Heart. Flaming Dragon Horse leaped high, and the Knight Great Spear charged forward. In an instant, there were countless shadows of man and horse that were one with the attack. They quickly flashed past and crashed into a huge rock in front of them. An earth-shattering attack. Boom! The rock that was as tall as a man was instantly blown into smithereens. Flames shot everywhere, turning into rain along with the crushed rocks. When the dust settled, List, who was riding Flaming Dragon Horse, had already walked out of the range of the explosion. He was wrapped in full body armor, and so was Flaming Dragon Horse. The silver-white full-body armor had a lot of scratches and black marks on it. Pushing away the mask on his face, List's handsome face was revealed. The corners of his mouth curled into a slight smile. The power is not bad. If this move hits, it should be able to cripple a World of Warcraft dog. Marcus and Gord arrived on their respective horses, followed by 4 of List's retainer knight. Oh my god, List, you really are a genius. I've already seen it. Is this the ultimate profoundness of Flaming Dragon Drill, Heart of Flaming Dragon Drill? You only used less than a week to learn all of this secret manual? Gord always liked to speak in a surprised tone. Marcus circled around the scattered gravel and was equally surprised. The area of impact is very uniform. None of the gravel is larger than the size of a fist. This proves that you have already mastered this move. It would be very difficult for an ordinary Earth Knight to do this. After saying that, he looked at List with some disbelief. In the past, this third son of the Count was a standard wastrel. He had enough chicken, fish, eggs and milk, and even ate World of Warcraft meat. However, his chi cultivation was inferior to that of a commoner knight. He did not expect that after advancing to an Earth Knight, it would only take him less than a week to completely master a mid-level chi secret manual. This reminded him of when he practiced the Against the Wind Breaker. It took him a whole month and a half to master the ultimate profoundness. For a moment, his heart was filled with mixed feelings. Could this be the true difference between commoners and nobles? List handed over the shield and Knight Great Spear in his hands to the retainer knight and conveniently took off his helmet. Breathing in the fresh air, his excitement had not yet subsided. I originally thought that a Fiery Dragon Drill secret manual would take me a few months to master. I didn't expect it to be so easy. It seems that I can also take some time to learn the Fire Surge Fluctuations secret manual. It's never a bad thing to have more skills. You have this kind of talent, so of course you should learn a few more secret manuals. List, I already said that you have your father's style. In the future, you will definitely make the tulip family shine. Thank you for your auspicious words, Teacher Gort. On the way back, Gort and List talked loudly. This was what he was good at. Marcus's thoughts drifted far away. No one knew what he was thinking about. It wasn't until he entered the castle for dinner, ate the dinner in front of him in a daze and was sent out by List that he came back to his senses. He waited for Gort to ride away while humming a tune. He looked at List, who was still standing at the castle gate as if waiting for him to speak. He said in a solemn tone, "Lord Baron, may I know where your gaze is?" My gaze, List thought in his heart, Marcus is asking me if I have the ambition to make a name for myself. Marcus, who wholeheartedly wanted to become a noble, naturally wouldn't be willing to curl up in a small rural town and follow a baron who had no ambitions. However, List didn't directly answer, "Teacher Marcus, don't listen to what a person says. Look at what they do. What they say can be true and false, but what they do can be seen at a glance, isn't it?" "I understand." Marcus suddenly knelt down on one knee and placed his right hand on his chest, performing the etiquette of allegiance. "I am willing to be the vanguard of Lord. Teacher Marcus, please rise. My fief is still very small and weak. I need you to help me build it." List calmly helped Marcus up. He felt a sense of accomplishment. To be able to make an Earth Knight pledge allegiance, this was personal charisma. Returning to the castle. After taking a bath, he saw the smoke serpentines. Mission completed. Reward, a dragon horse with a meager bloodline. In a flash, the smoke distorted and a new mission was issued. Mission, fresh and tender alfalfa. Not only do cows like to eat it, horses also like to eat it. This is the foundation for establishing a horse farm, as well as the starting point for making a name for yourself. Please place the alfalfa sprite worm's worm stalk. Reward, 3 stalks of wild corn. After reading the serpentines, List was quite excited. The dragon horse had already arrived, but he didn't know where it was or who had discovered it. He was going to look for it tomorrow morning. However, what he was excited about was not the dragon horse, but the corn reward of the new mission. There was no such crop as corn in this world, at least not on the Coral Island. In the memories of his predecessor, there were no plants related to corn. Corn, this is a high-yielding crop. It is said to have the highest yield per unit area in the world. Moreover, it doesn't need to be managed, it will grow on its own. It is said to be a divine plant. It is naturally C4 and is easy to remove male. In the future, corn will be the world of cereals. In Interstellar, the humans who were on the verge of extinction only planted corn. As a child, List had planted fields before. He knew that corn had a high yield, but it didn't taste as good as wheat or rice. However, here, it didn't need to taste good. As long as it could fill one's stomach, it was the best crop. The flower town's wheat only yielded 1 to 200 caddies per moo. Once corn was planted, it didn't need to yield several thousand caddies per moo. As long as it exceeded 500 caddies per moo, it would be enough to feed more people. At that time. Chapter 22. Before List could order his men to search for dragon horses, Gort, who was in charge of changing the alfalfa in the dairy farm, rushed to the castle early in the morning. List, good news. Our newly planted alfalfa has sprouted and is growing well. Most importantly, a wild horse had been lured over from an unknown place to eat the alfalfa. That wild horse is very spirited. Oh, it's even taller and more majestic than your fiery dragon horse. Call Teacher Marcus. Let's go to the dairy farm to take a look at this wild horse. After eating the alfalfa, it has to sell itself in exchange for food expenses, right? That's right, its food expenses are its own, Everything in the territory belonged to the Lord. Without a doubt, this wild horse was List's private property. The group quickly arrived at the dairy farm. Sure enough, they saw a black wild horse leisurely eating the newly sprouted alfalfa on the pasture that should have belonged to the cows. This wild horse was tall, its fur was shiny, and its body was majestic. One could clearly see that its muscles were in a state of distinct lines. Teacher Marcus, you are an expert in identifying horses. What do you think of this wild horse? Wild Horse had already discovered List and the others, but it seemed to be very bold. Seeing that List and the others did not come close, it lowered its head and leisurely ate the grass. Marcus's eyes lit up and he said excitedly, "My lord, what a fine horse." The bones were thin, but the frame was big. The bulging muscles were beautiful, the limbs were long, and the Achilles tendon was also very long. The neck should be long and straight, slanted forward, and the buttocks should be square. The color of its fur is also very bright, which means that it has no disease. Most importantly, its eyes are very sharp. How does it compare to the blue-blooded horse? I'm sorry, sir, I've never seen a blue-blood horse. The best horse I've seen is the Count's black leopard. It's said that it has the bloodline of the World of Warcraft's drywood leopard. But the mastiff is far inferior to this wild horse. A horse with a white forehead is called a D. The mastiff was the mount of the Earl of Coral Island, so List was naturally familiar with it. The black wild horse in front of him had an aura that far surpassed that of a black panther. After all, dragons were the most sacred animals, and dragon horses were the kings of horses. How do we catch it? Marcus said, I can overturn it with my bare hands. After all, it's just a horse. However, if you want it to be your mount, then you have to subdue it yourself. Wild horses will only yield to people who can subdue them. List did not want to tame the dragon's talk as his mount. He hoped that the dragon's talk would become a true stallion and breed a dragon's talk clan for him. However, taming a wild dragon breed horse was an interesting matter. List did not let Marcus do it for him. He walked up to the Mustang himself. When he approached, the grass-eating Mustang immediately became alert. It turned around and glared fiercely at List, as if warning List not to cross the line. When List got closer and closer, the Mustang finally lost its patience and directly bit at List. His body twisted, and his good horsemanship allowed List to instantly turn around and ride on the Mustang's back. The Mustang felt great humiliation after being ridden by someone. It frantically shook its body and jumped around, trying to throw List off. However, List held its neck, and his body was bursting with fighting energy. He was not moved at all. The Earth Knight could fight against a real World of Warcraft, let alone a horse. Half an hour later, the Mustang, tired from tossing and turning, finally stopped. It panted and let List ride it, directing it to the left and right. Wiping the sweat from his forehead, List laughed, "What a stubborn big fellow. Its fur is pure black, without a single strand of mixed hair. I might as well call you Black Dragon." The pure black horse was called Black. Coupled with its meager dragon bloodline, the name Black Dragon was very fitting. "Carl, bring me some wheat bran biscuits." List dismounted. Although taming a Mustang wasn't too difficult, it was really tiring. He was already sweating all over. At this time, Fiery Dragon also came over. It was a young mare. While rubbing against List's shoulder, it opened its eyes wide and looked at the tall Black Dragon at the side. However, Black Dragon simply didn't look straight at Fiery Dragon. It still held its head high and didn't try to curry favor with List. It still retained a trace of unruliness. Even when List took the wheat bran biscuits and fed it, it still didn't show any affection. "Sir, Black Dragon is an adult horse. If it is to be fed as a warhorse, then it would be best to abort it so as to avoid losing weight," Marcus said. "Abort?" List waved his hand, "That won't do. I have already decided to use Black Dragon as a stallion to breed a herd of horses for the Flower Town. It would be a huge loss if such an extraordinary horse couldn't reproduce. So it wants to be a stallion. Marcus nodded, approving of the decision. Even if he didn't know that Black Dragon was a Mustang, he could still see that it was extraordinary. It would be a pity to abort such a horse. Black Dragon, who didn't know that it had escaped a calamity, ate the wheat bran biscuits and recovered its initial contentment. Occasionally, it would nibble on the alfalfa on the ground. Gort wanted to step forward and stroke it, but was startled by Black Dragon's snort. He had no choice but to stiffly change the subject. Where did Black Dragon come from? Did it come from the Thorns Ridge? Perhaps there are still Black Dragon in the Thorns Ridge. There are wild horses on the island. Now that I think about it, it is really strange. Marcus guessed. The living environment of horses was usually the prairie. The Coral Island didn't have enough prairies for wild horses to live in. It wasn't very realistic to naturally breed wild horses. Perhaps it drifted over from somewhere else, or perhaps it was a horse raised by the island's residents that became wild. In short, it couldn't have appeared out of thin air. Besides, I think that in a few days, Black Dragon might come out of the Thorns Ridge. At that time, a Black Dragon horse herd would really be formed. That would be for the best. List was also puzzled. He didn't know if he believed that Black Dragon lived on this land, or if there was some kind of existence behind the smoke mission that forcibly fabricated a Black Dragon. He was inclined to believe that Black Dragon lived here, and that the smoke mission was just a trigger mechanism rather than a rigid creation. As for what the smoke mission was, there was no way to solve it for the time being. He could only restrain himself and slowly answer it in the future. He looked at the new tender alfalfa, which formed a very beautiful grassland. Suddenly, he thought of the wasteland outside the castle. Teacher Gort, how about we plant alfalfa on the wasteland around the castle? We can build a horse farm outside the castle and raise the Black Dragon horse herd. Oh, it should be feasible. Why don't we give it a try? Then I'll leave it to Teacher Gort. List rode Black Dragon back to the castle. Gort and Marcus were also preparing to return. On the way, Gort suddenly asked, Marcus, you are now calling List, sir? Yes. It's not like you to make a decision so quickly. I don't have many choices, Mr. Gort. Marcus gazed into the distance. The short castle was bathed in the sunlight, shining brightly. Besides, didn't you often say that he has the demeanor of a Sir Count? I believe that he won't stay dormant in a remote place like the Flower Town forever. Chapter 23. List enlisted the idle farmers on the dairy farm to cultivate the wasteland around the castle and cultivate alfalfa. Originally, Gort's idea was that as the Lord's serfs, they had to work unconditionally. List wasn't that exploitative, so he decided to take care of the farmers 3 meals a day. Commoners generally only had 2 meals a day, so they rushed to work. He distributed some of the extra wheat bran in the castle to the working farmers. Wheat bran was the removed skin of the wheat. Here, he only had fine wheat flour. Wheat bran was basically used to feed the horses, but commoners used it to eat. The wheat bran biscuit he fed to the horses was the food that many farmers ate. Speaking of which, the nutritional value of wheat bran is higher than that of wheat flour. List remembered buying wheat bran biscuit in his previous life. The seller claimed that wheat bran was rich in dietary fiber and B vitamins, which could improve constipation and lower cholesterol. However, wheat bran is really unpalatable and difficult to digest. As an aristocrat, he didn't lack nutrition, so there was no need to force himself to eat coarse wheat bran. Aristocrats naturally ate white bread. Here, bread was the absolute staple food. According to different materials and taste, it could be divided into 9 grades. There were 4 grades of white bread and 5 grades of black bread. The highest grade of white bread was made from fine wheat flour that had been sifted and selected. Only great aristocrats had the financial, material and manpower to make this kind of white bread. The price of this kind of white bread was also astonishingly expensive. One piece cost at least several silver coins. The second grade of white bread was made from fine wheat flour. Because the coarse particles were sifted out, it had a very delicate taste. Usually, one piece would sell for 1 silver coin. The next grade of white bread was made from fine wheat flour that had not been sifted and had a slightly worse taste. 1 silver coin could buy 2 or 3 pieces. The lowest grade of white bread was made from coarse wheat flour. It was simply processed and had a slightly worse taste. One could buy 1 piece for 10 copper coins. The white bread that Liszt currently ate was of this grade. The white bread eaten in Tulip Castle was of a higher grade. Commoners ate black bread. A few copper coins worth of whole wheat bread without bran could only be afforded by wealthy commoners. A copper coin's worth of whole wheat bread without bran could only be afforded by ordinary freedmen. As for serfs, they mostly ate wheat flour without bran mixed with other flours to make mixed black bread, which could be bought for 1 copper coin. The poorer serfs either ate the grain black bread made of peas and other grains ground into flour, or ate bran cakes made entirely of bran. In addition, Liszt also knew of a type of black bread that was commonly made by civilians. This kind of black bread, after fermentation, would become very, very hard. Commoners would cut it into slices and use it as plates or table legs. It was said that some plates of black bread could be used for months. What an evil feudal society! Liszt sighed hypocritically and withdrew his thoughts. He had no intention of breaking the aristocratic system. One's position determined one's position. As a noble, he could enjoy the status bestowed upon him by the times, but he couldn't possibly pull himself down from his position. Besides, it was very difficult to break. There were no dragons or sprites, so how could he break it? "Master, do I need to bring Fiery Dragon over?" Thomas cautiously asked. He had always been so cautious in front of Liszt. "No need. By the way, Thomas, how is Black Dragon in the stable? Did it throw a tantrum?" "Master, your newly subdued big guy bullied Fiery Dragon last night. But this morning, Fiery Dragon can already eat grass next to it." Liszt nodded. He wasn't surprised. 2 tigers couldn't live on the same mountain, unless one was a male and one was a female. Black Dragon was a male and Fiery Dragon was a female, so it was natural for them to live in peace. Moreover, it was very likely that the first batch of Black Dragon's offspring would be produced by Fiery Dragon. Liszt didn't oppose it. Fiery Dragon was also a fine breed mixed with the low-level World of Warcraft's Fiery Dragon bloodline. Only by combining the strong could they produce better offspring. He no longer paid attention to it. Liszt began to practice the moves of the fluctuating flames fluctuations. Generally, an Earth Knight wouldn't practice the next secret manual before being proficient in the Chi secret manual that was most compatible with them. Liszt had a good perception and was still familiar with the Fiery Dragon drill, so he could practice the fluctuating flames fluctuations at the same time. Different from the Fiery Dragon drill, the fluctuating flames fluctuations focused on group battles. Its moves often consisted of the sword sweeping a large area and the spear striking a large group. Unknowingly, he was already immersed in cultivation. He was constantly releasing his fire-attributed chi, burning the surrounding air. Its might was unknown, but at least on the scene, it was powerful. Great fire wave. With a slash of his sword, flames shot in all directions. He saw the butler Carter quickly walking towards him. He couldn't help but retract his chi and ask, "Mr. Carter, what's the matter?" "Master, Jesse just returned from cutting the grass outside and said he saw a caravan. I'm guessing that it might be Sir Count and Sir Baron's team." Liszt's spirit was roused. They finally came. "I'll have to trouble you 2 teachers to come over and welcome the caravan with me. I'll go take a bath and change my clothes first." He hurriedly went upstairs to take a bath. Before long, Marcus and Gord arrived. The castle was located on a slope and had a good line of sight. They could already see the Thorns Ridge in the distance, where the caravan was slowly approaching. Teacher Gort, remember to remind me to reorganize the patrol team. When the caravan arrived, no one gave me any hint. I only knew when my servant discovered it. The patrol team is a bunch of bastards. You have to lend me your retainer knight to train them. No problem. List mounted his horse. He didn't ride Fiery Dragon, but rather rode his newly subdued Black Dragon, showing off, "Come with me to welcome the caravan. Father shouldn't come in person. The one following the tulip great sprite might be my elder brother." The three urged their horses forward to welcome them. Carter busily called out to all the servants, "Keep your spirits up and remember to tidy up your clothes. Don't look dirty and lose master's face. Jesse, I'm talking about you. Oh, heavens, there's mud on your pants. Are you going to make us unable to lift our heads? Quickly go back and change them." "Yes, yes, yes, Mr. Carter." The assistant manservant, the flaxen-haired Jesse Ricewater, hurriedly went back to his room to change his pants. Carter shouted again, "Mrs. Morrison, inform Mrs. Abbey to prepare desserts, tea, and snacks. Also, remember to prepare the ingredients and prepare the most sumptuous banquet. There will be people who need master to personally entertain." "Are you saying there will be aristocrats coming?" "Of course there will be. You know that the black tulip is very important. The family's elves will come to assimilate it. Perhaps young Master Levis will escort them, or perhaps young Master Lytton. In any case, they are all important people. We can't lose Master's face, as well as Thomas's peers." Thomas's peers were also the valets of the various nobles. Chapter 24. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, a total of 10 carriages, under the escort of a team of knights, followed the yellow road to the castle's hill. "Sir Baron." The knight in the lead dashed before List and performed a knight's salute. "I have escorted the convoy that departed from Tulip Castle to the Flower Town for the transaction." So it was Lord Loudon. It must have been a tiring journey. "Who has come this time?" List returned the salute. Lord Loudon's knight said, "Sir Viscount and Sir Baron of Falcon Town have come together." "Is that so? My sister has also come." While they were speaking, a luxurious carriage had already climbed up the hill and stopped in front of List and the others. The accompanying serving men opened the carriage doors on both sides, and a young man and a young woman in aristocratic attire alighted. The young man was somewhat similar to List, but he was a bit uglier. He also had light blonde hair and sapphire-colored eyes. The young woman was also somewhat similar to List, but she was also not as good-looking as List. She had light blonde hair and sapphire-colored eyes. She did not wear the attire of an aristocratic lady. Instead, she wore the same aristocratic attire as the young man. The necessary riding attire was similar to a tuxedo, but more gorgeous. "My dear brother, the Flower Town's Lord, Baron List, look who has come." The young man, Levis Tulip, said with a laugh. List dismounted and walked towards Levis. "Big brother, I did not expect you to come in person. Also, my sister, how is life in Falcon Town?" Li Weiwei Tulip raised her slender eyebrows. "List, I feel that you have become an Earth Knight?" "That's right, I have fortunately broken through, even though it is a bit late. It seems that after leaving the shackles of Tulip Castle, you have been set free in the Flower Town. You became an Earth Knight, found a new tulip potion, and I heard that a peanut worm was born in the town. Your luck is so good that it makes me jealous." Levis smiled and patted List's shoulder. Actually, the relationship between brothers and sisters was not very good. Behind their passionate actions, it was more of a polite exchange between nobles. No matter what, the three siblings had already become true noble knights. At this time, List's black dragon suddenly snorted and roared at the horses pulling the carriage. The horses were so frightened that they retreated and almost ran away with the carriage. Only then did Levis and Li Weiwei notice the shiny black dragon. Li Weiwei's eyes lit up. What a magnificent horse. List, isn't your mount a red mare that father gave you as a birthday present? Where did you get this steed? Can you give it to big sister? I tamed it from the Thorns Ridge. I am sorry, big sister, but I have no intention of selling it. I am not surprised that you refused. However, to refuse so bluntly, List, you have improved since you were a child. Li Weiwei was a little surprised. When List was young, he was a little submissive and timid in front of her. People are always changing. I am already an adult, so I have to make some changes. List said, the sun outside is dazzling. You must be tired from the journey. Please come to the castle and rest. Mr. Carter must have already prepared tea and snacks. We can relax and chat. Then, Mr. Loudon, please invite the greater and lesser sprites over. Levis turned around. Knight Loudon quickly arrived next to the carriage and instructed several other knights to carry out 3 exquisite boxes, 1 large and 2 small, from the carriage compartment. The boxes were not big. The larger box was only the size of a cradle. Inside lay a beautiful creature the size of a baby. It resembled a human, but its entire body was translucent, as if it was a glowing, colorful gem. It also had wings folded on its back. This was the tulip family's treasure, the greater tulip. The other 2 small boxes each had 2 lesser sprites the size of an adult's foot. They were equally beautiful, but not as bright as the greater sprite. The greater tulip seemed to have been awakened by the knight's movements. It stretched inside the box, and then rubbed its eyes as it woke up. It flapped its wings and flew into the air. As it had no gender, it naturally did not need to wear clothes. Its bright eyes looked around and quickly locked onto Levis. Levis, have we arrived? Where is the black tulip? The voice was sweet, like that of a young girl. We have arrived. Sweet fragrance, this is the flower town. When it gets dark, you will be able to see the black tulip. Levis responded. At this time, the greater tulip looked at List. Wow, List, long time no see. List nodded with a smile. We haven't seen each other for almost 2 months, sweet fragrance. Before he finished speaking, the 2 tulip lesser sprites also woke up. They each flew out of the box and circled around the greater sprite. From time to time, they would let out a few wow and wow. The lesser sprites had unlocked their spiritual wisdom, but their intelligence was limited and they could not speak. He led the sprites into the castle. The castle's living room. Those with noble titles sat around the table, while those without noble titles were received by Marcus downstairs. List, Levis, Li Weiwei, Gort, Loudon, and the other Lord Knight, Bruce, the 6 of them took their seats together. Carter directed the servants to continuously serve tea and snacks. The cook, Abby Ladle, used all of her skills to continuously serve delicacies one after another. The greater tulip sprite sat on Levis's shoulder, shaking its 2 chubby little feet, and began to doze. 1 tulip lesser lay on Levis's head, and the other on Li Weiwei's shoulder. There were also several small jade boxes containing tulip sprite worms. Seeing such a scene, List realized, the Count has transferred the greater sprite and lesser sprite to Levis. Otherwise, they would not be so close. He was very jealous. No matter how many times he had seen them, the sprites were so beautiful, yet such beautiful things belonged to others. But this was only a matter of time. After all, Levis was the next Earl of Coral Island. I didn't expect the Flower Town's castle to be so crude. List, you should properly repair it. Levis, holding a teacup, looked at it casually. Compared to the Tulip Castle, this small castle was no different from a commoner's thatched cottage. I also want to, but I lack money, manpower, and materials. You didn't ask for the materials to build the castle. The carriage is loaded with food, drink, and a lot of seeds. After the enfeoffment ceremony, father gave you a lot of food, so why do you still need so much food? The flower town is more desolate than I thought. I have to hoard some food, otherwise, one day, I will really go hungry. List gave a simple reason. Hoarding food was always the right thing to do. Hoarding food, building high walls, and slowly becoming king, this was the routine since ancient times. He wanted to develop the flower town. Without solving the food problem, there was no development at all. Well, I think these boring topics can be carried out while eating. The most important thing now is to see the black tulip. My lesser sprite can't wait. Li Weiwei interrupted the two. List nodded. He really didn't want to pretend to be friendly. Chapter 25. In the center of the flower farm, the greater tulip sprite, together with the lesser tulip sprite, as well as 6 tulip sprite worms, surrounded the black tulip, absorbing the black tulip's aura and assimilating it. List stood to the side, attentively watching the greater tulip sprite. In the memories of his predecessor, the greater sprite named Sweet Fragrance was estimated to be more than 60 years old. 20 years ago, it was just a lesser sprite. During List's father's generation, it successfully evolved into a greater sprite. With Sweet Fragrance's help, the tulip family developed rapidly, and a large amount of tulip was exchanged for countless wealth. Using the wealth to accumulate the orders of chivalry, Li William was conferred the title of Count within a few years due to his military exploits. The Coral Island became the family's territory. Sprite. Although I have the memories of my predecessor and have seen Sweet Fragrance since childhood, but no matter how many times I look at it, it is not enough. Sprites are beautiful things that should not exist in this world. Unfortunately, it is not mine. I only have 5 sprite worms. No, I will soon have 6. He wrote to the Count, hoping to exchange for a sprite worm. The Count clearly agreed, because Levis had brought a wheat sprite worm with him. My dear brother, father asked me to give you this wheat sprite worm as a reward for discovering the tulip potion. Levis took out a jade box and handed it to List. Is this a reward outside of the transaction, or inside of the transaction? Outside of the transaction, hee. List, don't think of us as outsiders. Levis smiled gently, his aristocratic temperament not much worse than List's. In any case, the blood of the tulip family flows in our veins. The importance of a tulip potion is huge for the family. After father heard about it, he was very happy. Then I will accept it. Thanks Sir Father for me. Why don't you thank him in person? Li Weiwei walked over. Grandfather has fallen ill and is bedridden. Father has prepared for us 3 siblings to visit him. Therefore, you will have to return to the Coral City with us tomorrow. Is that so? List nodded. There was no reason for him to refuse. Therefore, let's leave the reminiscing for lunch. First, let's settle the formal negotiations. Li Weiwei, you talk with List first. I will go take a look at the scenery of the flower town. I have never been to this small town. Levis rode on his own steed and left with the retainer knight and Loudon, who was guarding his safety. They watched as Levis left. Li Weiwei suddenly said, "Are you really not willing to part with this dark horse?" "I'm sorry, sister. It's extraordinary. Did you notice?" "Yes." "Determined not to sell?" "Not for sale." "Well, it seems that not only did your luck improve, but your temper also improved." Li Weiwei narrowed her eyes. When she was young, she had beaten List quite a few times. The previous List had been a good-for-nothing, and he had often been beaten by his older brother and sister, who had snatched his toys. List did not want to recall the past, as it was not his experience. "Sister, what did you bring me? In business, you cannot fool me. I will not intervene in the sale of the tulip magic potion. I just came to assimilate a lesser sprite and 2 sprite worms. I will pay you 500 caddies of wheat, 800 caddies of corn, 100 caddies of pig iron and 50 caddies of wrought iron, as well as a packet of Falcon Town specialty, sweetheart seeds. Without the sweetheart worm, I don't care if you can grow them or not. It is less than I expected, but it will do. Don't be greedy. If it was Lytton, I would only be willing to pay half. Lytton was the youngest son of a count. His mother was the current countess, the daughter of a minor aristocratic family. The mother of Liszt and his siblings was the daughter of a marquis, which was far from what Lytton could compare to. To measure aristocratic status, the nobility of one's parents and connections were the key. Seemingly dissatisfied with Liszt's current attitude, Li Weiwei proposed a competition after the deal was settled. What is the attribute of your qi? Fire. What secret manual did you practice? Fiery dragon drill. Let's have a match. Let me see your current strength. Li Weiwei took the spear carried by the retainer knight and said, after advancing to an earth knight, I have not swapped pointers with you for a long time. Swapping pointers was an excuse. The purpose was nothing more than to teach Liszt a lesson. However, the current Liszt was no longer the yes-man Liszt. He just faintly smiled, sorry, I have not finished practicing my secret manual. Let's have a match another day. Li Weiwei's gaze was cold, are you running away? This is not the quality a knight should have. The quality of a knight is fairness. Sister, why not wait until I finish practicing the fiery dragon drill? Liszt softly dispelled the verbal pressure. Raising her eyebrows, Li Weiwei put down her spear, you are as timid as ever. This is called wisdom. You really know how to flatter yourself. Li Weiwei was 19 years old, unmarried, and still a vigorous young woman. Liszt, on the other hand, had long since passed the Chinibyu stage. He would not get angry because of a few words. A few meaningless words were exchanged. Levis had already returned from his stroll. Dirty, messy, poor. He shook his head, Liszt, I already understand your need for food. The flower town is far more impoverished than any small town I have ever seen. Indeed. However, I will make it prosperous. By relying on the black tulip? Then let's talk about this. Let's talk about assimilation first. For the greater sprite, lesser sprite, and 6 sprite worms, Tulip Castle will pay a total of 3,000 caddies of wheat, 2,000 caddies of barley, 500 caddies of wheat flour, 1,000 caddies of wrought iron, 30 barrels of beer, as well as seeds of various crops. After counting, Liszt did not haggle and approved the deal. Carts after carts of supplies were transported to the castle's warehouse, filling up the somewhat shabby warehouse in an instant. Just the food alone was enough for the castle to eat for half a year. The pig iron and wrought iron could be used to forge tools and armor. As for the seeds, he had specifically asked for them to be planted in the flower town. Without sprite worms, the barren land could only be watered with farm manure to see if it would yield any results. Speaking of which, the small town was no longer very dirty. Every day, there would be people picking up the feces and selling them to the castle. Liszt ordered people to distribute the feces to each settlement and use them to fertilize the fields. The time was short and the quantity was small. For the time being, apart from the peanut settlement, there were no obvious results in other places. The lunch atmosphere was pretty good. Gort was a very good foil to the banquet atmosphere, talking cheerfully and wittily. After the meal, Levis and Liszt discussed the planting and sale of the black tulip. Father intends to buy out the planting and sale of the black tulip in one go. As a reward, you will get 1,000 gold coins. At the same time, you can also plant them in the flower town and then sell them to the tulip castle. That won't do. The black tulip is the cornerstone of the flower town's development. I will not give up on a steady stream of income for a trifling 1,000 gold coins. That is 1,000 gold coins, which is not a small amount. I don't know if the flower town will be able to earn 1,000 gold coins in 50 years of tax revenue. If I plant the magic ingredient in large quantities, perhaps in a few years, I will be able to earn 1,000 gold coins a year just by relying on the black tulip. Magic ingredients are in short supply. There is no magic ingredient that cannot be sold on the market. You should know that without the family's channels, the black tulip cannot be transported out of the thorns ridge. That is why I want to discuss the planting and sale of the black tulip with father, or brother. I can provide the seeds for the tulip castle. However, I will have to collect a certain share of the black tulip planted. You mean, we will plant it while you lie in the castle and count the gold coins? Chapter 26. I wonder if you are crazy, this is simply an exorbitant demand. Levis raised his voice to express his dissatisfaction. Don't be impatient, brother. Very well, I will listen quietly. What reason do you have to make me agree to such an absurd condition? List, my dear brother, you should understand that the black tulip is very important to the tulip family, but it is not indispensable. We already have 3 varieties of tulip magic potions. I am very clear about this. I am also clear that the magic power contained in the black tulip is better than that of the other 3 varieties. It is suitable to become the family's pillar. Magic potions, while miraculous, were also very troublesome. They had to be cultivated by elves in order to reproduce. Without elves cultivating, the next generation would gradually lose their magic power and degenerate into ordinary plants. But this did not hinder their value. Concocting magic potions, forging magic equipment, cultivating magic and chi, all of these were inseparable from magic potions. Coral Island's Night College had opened a pharmacy course, which specialized in magic potions. Once an Earth Knight's cultivation stagnated, they would have to rely on magic potions to strengthen themselves and attack the Sky Knight. Every Sky Knight was a medicine jar. It was unknown how many magic potions they had to consume in order to obtain high-grade chi. Without the support of the family's tulip magic potion, Lee William might not be able to break through and become the Grand Duchy of Sapphire, one of the few Sky Knights. Therefore, List was very clear that the value of magic potions was immeasurable. His brother, the exceptionally talented Earth Knight, would not miss out on the black tulip. After a pause, List calmly said, "My talent is very poor. It is very difficult for me to hope to become a Sky Knight. However, brother, you are as talented as father when he was young. I think that with the black tulip and a steady stream of magic potions, your path to becoming a Sky Knight would be even smoother." He then glanced at Li Weiwei. "Sister is the same. I believe that a Sky Knight is far more worthwhile than 1,000 gold coins, isn't it? I sincerely hope that brother and sister can become a Sky Knight. The tulip family needs you to support it. As for me, I just want to make some money to improve my life." Speaking of the Sky Knight, Levis's breathing became slightly hurried. He became an Earth Knight at the age of 13. This year, he was 21 years old. Everyone said that he could become another Sky Knight in the tulip family. But he himself knew that there was a huge gap between an Earth Knight and a Sky Knight. Even if he exhausted all of his family's resources, he wouldn't necessarily be able to cross that gap. Moreover, he had an equally talented younger brother, Litten Tulip. Litten's mother's family was only a small aristocrat, not worth mentioning. But he had to admit that his mother, the current countess, was still very good at pillow talk. A small half of the resources of the Tulip Castle were given to Litten. This made Levis's heart bleed and he complained to his father. Shouldn't the family try their best to train him to become a Sky Knight? Why waste resources? He narrowed his eyes slightly and said in a low voice, "List, if you really support me, you should not put forward such harsh conditions. Then, let me put it another way. I will only cooperate with brother and sister for the black tulip business. Father will not care about a magic potion." List's subtext was that avoiding the Tulip Castle meant avoiding Litten. In the future, the production of the black tulip would only be distributed among the 3 siblings. The half-brother, Litten, was very arrogant. He looked down on List and often rolled his eyes at List. List did not hesitate to scam him. Levis pondered for a moment and asked, Li Weiwei will also participate? I didn't have this intention before. However, since List invited me, why not? Li Weiwei's talent was not as good as Levis's, but she had the same desire to become a Sky Knight. Don't forget, I also have a sprite. Alright, let's talk about how to divide it. After several attempts and compromises, the three siblings smoothly reached an agreement. After the black tulip seeds were harvested, they would be bred by the tulip grader sprite near the Coral City. After the new batch of seeds were harvested, they would be widely planted in the Coral City, the Falcon Town, and the Flower Town. For the first 3 years, all the black tulip magic potions were handed over to Levis to deal with. List, on the other hand, took a share of the profits according to the market price, 30% for the Coral City and 20% for the Falcon Town. 3 years later, the Falcon Town's black tulip magic potions were no longer handed over to Levis. Instead, Li Weiwei would deal with them alone and give List a share of 25%. 10 years later, List stopped taking a share of the profits. At present, Tulip Castle's golden tulip magic potions have an annual profit of about 5,000 gold coins. The black tulip magic potions should be able to surpass this scale. Assuming that it is 7,000 gold coins, then my annual share would be about 2,000 gold coins, which is far more cost-effective than the one-time payment of 1,000 gold coins. After signing the formal agreement, List pondered inwardly. He originally thought that a 20% share of the profits would be enough. However, Levis took advantage of his youth and ignorance and intended to buy it all out for 1,000 gold coins. Therefore, in retaliation, he raised the share to 30%. Even blood brothers should settle accounts clearly. Besides, List didn't think that they were blood brothers. Apart from the blood in their bodies, they were practically unrelated. After the agreement was reached, there seemed to be a bit more tacit understanding between the three siblings. Outside the castle, the farmers reclaiming the wasteland were still busy. What, are you going to plant crops outside the castle? Wheat or barley? Li Weiwei stood by the window and gazed into the distance. I'm going to plant alfalfa and raise horses here. Levis came over. Raise horses? Are you going to form your own orders of chivalry? I hope to form a knight squad. The Thorns Ridges World of Warcraft is a big threat. Every winter, there are people who die in World of Warcraft. The fief doesn't even have people who can use chi. Big brother, let's talk in private. List suddenly thought of something. The two of them walked to a separate quiet room. What's the matter? Why are you being so secretive? I remember that the population of Coral Island was not large when I was a child. Father used a fleet to transport people back from the outer islands? Correct. When Father was conferred the title of Count, there were only a few thousand aboriginals on Coral Island. The population was trafficked from outside. Otherwise, 90% of the population on Coral Island were serfs of the family. Then, big brother, have you ever considered continuing to traffic in human beings? Continue to traffic in human beings? Levis carefully sized up List. Can the Flower Town still support more people? I doubt that this decaying town can support you, yet you still want to support others? Or rather, where do you plan to sell people? Trafficking in human beings was not a glorious thing. However, for aristocrats to reclaim wasteland, they always needed people. Basically, many aristocrats were more or less involved in the trafficking of people. The Flower Town is indeed very small. Therefore, I am preparing to develop the Thorns Ridge, which requires a lot of manpower. With the production of black tulip, I believe that it can last for a while. At that time, it will be enough to develop the Flower Town. At the very least, it will not be worse than elder sister's Falcon Town, said List half-truthfully. Chapter 27. Human trafficking is not out of the question. The family's fleet goes out to sea to trade every year. However, it is not worth the risk for a few hundred people. 5,000. What? I need 5,000 people. 5,000 people, are you sure you can handle it? I am sure. Levis narrowed his eyes. I will go back and think about it. Back in the living room, no one brought up the matter of human trafficking again. The atmosphere of the afternoon tea was very lively under Gort's liveliness. The convoy would stay in the flower town for one night. Most of the night and the retainers would stay in the town. Levis and Li Weiwei would stay in the castle with their personal servants. The butler, old Carter, was particularly busy today. Tom, where is Jesse? I need his help. His legs, which were not very agile, were sore from repeatedly going up and down the stairs. He wiped the sweat off his forehead and went into the kitchen. Jesse isn't helping in the kitchen? Jesse should be transporting horse fodder. There are dozens of horses in the castle. We don't have enough fodder to feed the horses. Tom carefully placed a sack of flour next to the stove. When he comes back, tell him to find me in the warehouse. I need someone to move the food that was delivered to the castle today to the cellar for storage. All right, Mr. Carter. The kitchen maid, Irene, looked up while washing vegetables. Mr. Carter, do you need my help? Without waiting for Carter to answer, the kitchen maid, Abby, scolded, you can't even finish the work in the kitchen, yet you still have the time to help. What, Irene, do you want to jump ship? Carter spread his hands. Irene, you probably won't be able to help. I know. God knows how long I have to stay in the kitchen today. It's hot and stuffy here, my clothes are soaked, and Mrs. Abby has heated the stove too much. Oh, is that so? Are you the chef or am I the chef? Do you want the master to entertain the distinguished guests at dinner? You are the chef. Then shut your little mouth and work quietly. Carter had already walked out of the kitchen. The kitchen was too hot, and he felt a bit of heaviness in his chest. He didn't know if he was suffering from heatstroke. It was not yet summer, but the weather was getting hotter. He took out a handkerchief, wiped his face, leaned against the wall, and took a breath. Mawson Patty, who was carrying a bucket, saw Carter and asked with concern, Are you feeling unwell, Mr. Carter? How could I be unwell? It's just a bit hot. Is that so? But you don't look well. Are you too nervous? There are too many guests in the castle today, and you need to take care of everything. How can I be nervous, Mrs. Mawson? I've seen more lively scenes in His Excellency the Earl's courtyard. I can handle this. Carter put away his handkerchief. Has young Master Levis and Miss Li Weiwei's rooms been tidied up? Miss Li Weiwei's personal maid has been complaining about the dust on the walls or the worn-out bedsheets. The quality of the utensils is not something we can decide. Don't be rude about the details of the work, and let the rest be. True aristocrats will not hold grudges because of this. The Tulip family are true aristocrats. Mrs. Morrison nodded. Mr. Carter, don't you really need to rest? Don't worry about me. Master is a good person, he definitely doesn't want to see you overwork. I'm not overworking. In fact, I'm enjoying it. The castle doesn't have many guests, and it's a rare opportunity for me to perform. Alright, I'm going to tidy up the warehouse. Yesterday, I was complaining that the food was getting less and less, but today, there's so much food that the warehouse can't hold it. The castle was very small, and there was no entertainment. After drinking the afternoon tea, a portion of the night prepared to go hunting in the Thorns Ridge. In this regard, List readily agreed. He also invited Levis and Li Weiwei to go hunting together. With so many Earth Knights, it would be best to catch all of the Thorns Ridge's World of Warcraft in one fell swoop. He had such a thought in his mind, even if I can't catch any World of Warcraft, it would be good to familiarize myself with the Thorns Ridge's terrain. He was neatly dressed. He mounted his horse. This time, he was riding Fire Dragon. He still hadn't gotten used to Black Dragon well enough, which affected his strength. He didn't let Thomas follow him, and only brought Marcus and the 4 retainer knight. Thomas, take good care of my black dragon. Also, don't forget to feed Dosen. It's still growing, it can't be hungry. What is a Dosen? Li Weiwei asked. A dog. Do you have a dog? What breed? Flying Dust Dog. Flying Dust Dog? World of Warcraft? Yes, a flying dust pup that teacher Marcus caught in the Thorns Ridge. List said casually. Earth Knight, Black Tulip, Peanut Sprite, Flying Dust Pup, and a handsome wild horse. List, the god of luck is looking after you. I am a bit envious of you. I can only say that life in the countryside is colorful. Falcon Town is also a countryside, but it is not as colorful as the Flower Town. That is because elder sister often lives in Tulip Castle, neglecting the life in the countryside. If you want, you can also continue to live in Tulip Castle. Father has no intention of driving you away. Levis rode over and interjected. Liz thought that this was just a polite remark. I like the Flower Town. It is very free here, and I can do whatever I want. Including planting grass at the castle gate. Levis pointed at the serfs cultivating the alfalfa and joked, your castle can be called the Horsefield Castle in the future. It was impossible for such a small castle to have a name. List raised his horsewhip, let's go. The sun is already setting in the west. If we can't enter the depths of the Thorns Ridge, then we will have to return. Fiery Dragon galloped in accordance with his intentions. He wanted to bring this group of knight into the Thorns Ridge. At the very least, he wanted to hunt a few World of Warcraft. Sooner or later, he would conquer the Thorns Ridge and incorporate the hills and woods into the Flower Town's territory. If he killed one more World of Warcraft, then he would be in less danger in the future. Unfortunately, during this hunting trip, they only hunted ordinary wild beasts. World of Warcraft was much smarter than wild beasts. Sensing the surging chi inside the Earth Knights, they hid early on. Even so, the prey they hunted was enough to hold a grand barbecue party. The aristocrats, knight, and servants gathered together, laughing amidst the beer and butter. Whoa, Mr. Barbecue, give me another rabbit leg. The great tulip sprite happily flew around. Sprites didn't need to eat or drink, but they could still digest food. Thomas, who was busy barbecuing, hurriedly handed the great sprite a roasted rabbit leg sprinkled with seasonings. The 2 lesser sprites next to him didn't greet him and ran away with 2 pieces of roasted meat in their mouths. Xiang, you eat too fast. Only by chewing more can you appreciate the taste of food. List said with a smile as he tore apart the rabbit head in his hand. Sprites were too rare. Looking at the sprites would make one's mood better. Besides, he was eating the barbecue that he liked very much. In this world, barbecue was probably the only food that suited his appetite. I like to eat in big bites. Chapter 28. It was already late at night. After the barbecue party was over, the knight went to the town to rest. Levis and Li Weiwei also entered their respective rooms. The old butler Carter, instead of red wine, took a glass of apple juice and entered the study. Master, you look very sober now. You're not drunk. Thank you. He took the glass of apple juice and took a sip. It was fruity and fragrant. The alcohol content of beer could only fill one's stomach, it was very difficult to get drunk. Under the candlelight, Carter's complexion was very unnatural. List discovered this during the day. Mr. Carter, are you feeling unwell? I am fine, master. If there is a problem, you must say it. Don't force yourself. Although the castle cannot do without the butler at the helm, your health is more important. Take care of yourself. Thank you. Old Carter was on the verge of tears. Tomorrow, when the assimilation of the sprite worms is complete, I will follow the convoy to the Coral City. I may leave the Coral Island for a few days, so you can take care of the matters in the castle. Rest assured, master. In fact, there is nothing to worry about. Apart from the few sprite worms, take good care of Dosen and Black Dragon. Also, look after the Black Tulip in my place once a day. In addition, do not stop the construction of the horse farm outside the castle. I hope that after I return, I will be able to settle the alfalfa sprite worms. The mission was always the most important. After a brief chat, they went back to sleep. Just like that, the night passed. The next morning, the 8 tulip sprite worms completed the assimilation of the Black Tulip, and the convoy immediately set off. Liszt rode Fiery Dragon, accompanied by Marcus and Thomas. The castle was entrusted to Carter and the town to Gort, as well as his 4 retainer knight. Teacher Gort, when I return, I need to see the patrol team from the Thorns Ridge to the east coast. As you wish, I will train them well. Gort said lightly. Then I will set off. I will bring a few bottles of gin on the return trip. Wow, this is great. On the back of Fiery Dragon, Liszt turned his head back. At the entrance of the castle, Butler Carter and a group of servants quietly watched him leave. He no longer hesitated and lightly kicked the horse's belly. The flaming dragon horse immediately rushed out and followed the carriages. He was a little excited. His predecessor was very familiar with the Coral Island. However, strictly speaking, it was his first time leaving the flower town to experience the outside world. It was a magical medieval land and a noble system under the rule of a knight. After leaving the Thorns Ridge, the majority of the lands he set foot on belonged to the Count. Only some small towns belonged to the Count's enfeoffed baron. There were also some smaller villages and settlements that were the fiefdoms of the Lord Knight. In the entire Coral Island, there was only one enfeoffed viscount. He was the Count's follower, Jonas Gravel. However, there was still a small island outside of the Coral Island. It belonged to another viscount follower, Trick Wildgrass. On the Coral Island, there were a total of 6 cities, 1 large and 5 small. The Coral City at the foot of the Tulip Castle was the largest city. The North Valley City, White Birch City, Elm City, and Snake Spear City were all owned by the Count. The Gravel Castle and its subsidiary Gravel City were all owned by Viscount Eunice. From the Flower Town to the Coral City, one had to pass through the North Valley City and the Baihua City. However, the carriages did not stop at the 2 small cities. They only ate a simple meal in the castle's courtyard in the North Valley City before heading straight for the Coral City. At 3 o'clock in the afternoon, when the horses' hooves stepped into a sea of flowers, the Coral City had arrived. The flowers were all kinds of tulip. Most of them were magic ingredients, while a few were ornamental flowers, the Grand Duchy of Sapphire, the tulip family's famous tulip. The sea of flowers followed the hillside. To the left of the main road was the towering city wall of the Coral City. The city faced the sea and had a busy dock. Liszt gazed into the distance and could still see the advanced, 2-masted sailing ships docked at the dock. The world had slowly transitioned from the era of oars to the era of sails. It was by relying on sailing ships that the Grand Duchy of Sapphire's first conquerors came to the archipelago from the mainland and established the archipelago state. Only sailing ships could traverse the sea. Unfortunately, sails are probably the end of ships. There isn't enough steel to give birth to the era of ironclads and even the era of steamships. Liszt sighed inwardly. He withdrew his gaze from the distance and turned to the right of the main road. On the right was a mountain range. On the side of the mountain range facing the sea was a steep cliff, while on the other side was a gentle slope. The Tulip Castle was built on the cliff. A wide road paved with gravel wound from the castle's gate to the Coral City at the foot of the mountain. The tall castle, like a flag, stood at the highest point of the Coral Island. The pointed tower pierced the blue sky. The thick rocks and the mountain range were connected. Surrounded by flowers, it was solemn and dignified, showing the majestic grandeur of the fortress. 10 years. According to List's memory, when the family came to the Coral Island, it took only 10 years to build such a tall and sturdy tulip castle. During this period, hundreds of serfs were even exhausted to death. Even today, the castle was still sporadically expanding. The glory of the aristocracy had always been built on blood. It was just the Count's castle. It was said that the Sapphire Grand Duke's castle had been built for 100 years. The corpses of serfs under the castle cliff were piled up tens of meters deep. It looks pale gray, but it is actually blood red. Rather than living here, I prefer the small castle in the flower town. At least I can live at ease. List's heart was heavy. Following his brother and sister, he walked towards the familiar yet unfamiliar castle. On the way, they met a group of knights coming out of the castle. The knight in the lead saluted Levis respectfully. "Young Master Levis, your trip was smooth." "Your trip was smooth, Captain Mickey." Levis bowed and returned the salute. Captain Mickey saluted Li Weiwei. "Miss Li Weiwei, your trip was smooth." "Your trip was smooth, Captain Mickey." At this time, Captain Mickey looked at List and, in the same impeccable manner, "Young Master List, welcome home." "Long time no see, Captain Mickey." List bowed. The knight in front of him was the captain of the knights stationed at the Tulip Castle, responsible for the security of the Tulip Castle. Mickey was a baron. His fief was managed by his family, while he held a position in the Tulip Castle. Led by the knight team, after a while, they arrived at the castle's gate. The butler, Louis, stood at the gate and welcomed the three siblings. His aged face was brimming with a warm smile. Oh, the happiest thing is always to see master's children return to the castle like tired birds returning to their nests. Grandpa Louis, long time no see. Your body is still so strong. List handed Fioridrigon's reins to a servant and greeted Louis. Louis was at least 60 years old. He had followed List's grandfather as a valet. Chapter 29. I haven't seen you for 2 months. Young Master List looks more spirited than before. How is life in Flower Town? Asked Louis with a smile. Everything is fine. That's good. The Lord has also talked about you several times. He is also very concerned about your current life. Would the Earl of Coral Island talk about List's life? List felt very doubtful. If the Earl really cared about List, he would not enferf List to a dilapidated town like Flower Town. Back home, List did not feel homesick. The soul in his body came from another distant world. The memories of his predecessor were just a movie and could not affect his current mood. He and the Tulip family did not have a familial relationship. Everything was more like a game. Substituting himself in the role of List. The busy servants in the castle bowed to the three young masters and young ladies when they saw them. The Tulip family members living here were only the Earl, the Countess, Levis, Lytton, and Li Weiwei, who often came back to live. However, there were more than 200 servants. Moreover, the servants had little free time. They were busy from morning to night. The real work could be summed up in one: to maintain the aristocracy's luxurious life. I'm going to take a bath. I can't stand the smell. Li Weiwei entered the castle and turned to leave. If father asks about me, tell him that I will be there in a moment. Levis seemed to be the owner of the castle. List, do you also need to take a bath first? Father has been keeping your room for you, including the clothes you didn't take away. There are servants to take care of them. I'm not a germaphobe. I will wait for father here. Brother, if you have something to do, just go ahead and do it. I don't need to entertain you. Well, the castle is also your home. Well, I have to go talk to Teacher Frank about the black tulip. He is helping me with the planting, sales, and pharmaceuticals. Also, the elves need to be settled down. These delicate little creatures can't be neglected in the slightest. Levis also left. Marcus followed a male servant to settle the horses, leaving only Liszt and a few male servants in the living room. He clasped his hands behind his back and admired the crystal lamps on the stone pillars. The number of crystals and other gems in the castle represented the wealth of the nobles, because most of the gems came from dragons. In Liszt's hometown, gems were probably used to look good. In this place, gems were natural magic attachments and contained magical power. Gems were indispensable for making magic items. The crystal lamp on the stone pillar in front of him was a magic item made of low-quality crystals. It could be lit until the magic power in the crystal was exhausted. Then, the magic power could be replenished by a magician or a knight. This cycle continued until the crystal was worn out and became an ordinary stone. Is a crystal lamp without any engravings worth admiring for so long? Following the sound of boots hitting the ground, someone spoke from behind Liszt. Liszt turned around. On the stairs leading to the second floor in the castle's living room, he saw the master of the Tulip Castle. He was a middle-aged man with light blonde hair and a pair of unattractive gray-green eyes, which were completely different from the sapphire-colored eyes of Liszt and his two siblings. His ordinary face had nothing special about it. Lee William Tulip would probably be inconspicuous in the crowd. However, he was the master of the Coral Island, the Sky Knight who had obtained the title of Count through his own efforts. Levis and Li Weiwei were more like their father than their mother, therefore, they were not good-looking. Only their sapphire-colored eyes were inherited from their mother. Liszt, on the other hand, inherited his mother's appearance, which was excessively handsome. It is probably because I am used to lighting candles that I am not used to the light of the crystal lamp. What, are you complaining about life in the flower town? Lee William stood on the stairs, not continuing to go down. I am very satisfied with life in the flower town, Sir Father. Liszt bowed and saluted. Your body is as strong as ever, your surging qi is about to overflow. Your qi has also increased, this is very good. It is also good to be content with a poor life and not complain. Lee William nodded. Where are your brother and sister? They are busy, they will come in a moment. Follow me to the study. Lee William turned around and went upstairs. Liszt followed him upstairs and entered the Count's study. The study was very large, with a wall of bookshelves, with many books made of thick bast paper. All of them had been sprayed with deodorant and fragrance, so that they did not have the unique stench of thick bast paper. Opposite the bookshelves, near the window, was a mahogany desk with many books piled up on it. Clatter. The Count unscrewed a bottle of old Crescent wine and poured it into 2 crystal goblets. The amber-red wine swayed in the goblets like blood, sparkling and translucent. The Count picked up the goblet and handed it to his third son. He seemed to be a bit surprised. It seems that living independently for 2 months has sharpened your temperament. In the past, Liszt was very restrained in front of him. The relationship between father and son was awkward. But now, Liszt looked very calm. Thank you. Liszt took the wine. I understand the responsibilities of a lord. I need to make changes. Positive changes. I think so too. After exchanging a few words, the father and son discovered that there was not much to talk about family. Thereupon, the Count raised his goblet, drank a mouthful of red wine, and stiffly changed the subject. Has the matter of the black tulip been properly handled? How much did Levis pay you? Tulip Castle is responsible for the cultivation and sales. I have a share of the profits for 10 years, 30%, which is only a cooperation between me, Levis, and Li Weiwei. The Count pondered for a moment. Only a cooperation between the 3 of you? Yes. You shouldn't have left Lytton, he is also your younger brother. He is still young, isn't it good to be sheltered under his father's wings? My brother and sister, we are all adults, it is natural for us to cooperate. Liszt smiled and did not deliberately explain or clarify his thoughts. Lytton looked down on him, so how could he look down on Lytton? As if only now remembering, Liszt asked, what about Madame and Lytton? I didn't see them. Madam took Lytton to Snake Spear City. Today is Lytton's uncle's birthday. The Countess came from a baron family of Coral Island, which was located in a small town near Snake Spear City. After that, there was another period of silence. List did not inherit the father-son relationship with the Count, and he could not chat like a stranger. It was difficult to grasp the degree between them, so he simply spoke less. The Count was somewhat unaccustomed to List's current temperament. Compared to the yes-man attitude of before, it was more like a conversation between equals, and he could not find the feeling of being reprimanded. After a while, he said, "It's still early for dinner. You can take a stroll around, or go to Coral City to see your friends." "No, I want to stay in the study and read." Chapter 30. History doesn't exist. Only some night novels can be used to speculate on the local customs and social development of the past. This was List's understanding of this. He also didn't know the origin of humans in this world. What was certain was that the Grand Duchy of Sapphire had been founded for 150 years. Last year, a grand anniversary celebration was held, which left an impression on List. There were many novels about the Knight of the Sapphire family in China. Some novels recorded that the Sapphire family had a heritage of 1,000 years. As for the Tulip family, there was no such thing as a genealogy. What List knew was his great-great-grandfather, the father of his grandfather's grandfather. At that time, the family didn't have a greater tulip sprite, nor a lesser tulip sprite. Therefore, there was no tulip surname. Their original surname was Tile, indicating that their family was originally of the common class. According to the family history passed down from father to son, the great-great-grandfather was born with divine strength. He followed an aristocrat and served the newly founded Sapphire family. He made meritorious service in the war and was conferred the title of Lord Knight. Since then, the family had risen to the ranks of the aristocracy. The great-great-grandfather's generation became a baron, the great-great-grandfather's generation became a viscount, and the great-great-grandfather's generation obtained a tulip sprite. After Lee William inherited the title, the sprite evolved into a greater sprite, and the family's surname was changed to Tulip. A few years later, Lee William became a Sky Knight. Because of his outstanding military service, he was conferred the title of Earl of Coral Island by the Sapphire Grand Duke. In order to show that the family had risen to the ranks of the upper aristocracy, the serpentine, Lee, in Lee William's name became the beginning of the name of the descendants. Each descendant would be called Lee XX, or Lee X, or Lee XXX, Lee XXXX. As for how many XS they could have, it depended on the mood of the celebrity. According to List's understanding, the word Lee was probably equivalent to the word Sher outside of the surname. Therefore, the Tulip family only had a history of 6 generations, spanning a time of about 150 years. If one went further up, they would not know who their ancestors were. First ancestor, distant ancestor, founding 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 ancestor. In his hometown, his family's genealogy could be traced back to the Ming dynasty. As for their bloodline, it could be traced all the way back to the era of the Yellow Emperor. Also, these night novels that boast about the Sapphire family are all nonsense. The family's 1,000-year inheritance has all kinds of strange origins. Some say that they originated from the southern part of the Iron and Steel Ridge Kingdom, some say that they migrated from the Blast Furnace Kingdom, and some say that they drifted here from the distant Blue Dragon Empire. If the Sapphire family is boasting behind these novels, then they are too careless. He wanted to sort out the general history of this world, but he felt that there was no hope. Among the night novels that he had read, the farthest recorded history was a novel called The Dull Night and the Red-Tailed Fire Dragon. The story of this novel took place in the unsetting Radiance Empire 10,000 years ago. However, Liszt had verified that the unsetting Radiance Empire was founded no more than 3,000 years ago. The unsetting Radiance Empire was also the country with the longest reign on the continent. Many countries were established with the friendship of dragons, but they would decline because of the death or departure of the dragon. Even the destruction of the country was normal due to the dragon-slaying war. At the beginning of the founding of the Grand Duchy of Sapphire, a dragon-slaying war took place. At that time, the Sapphire Dragon was almost killed by the invaders of the Eagle Kingdom, and was unable to establish a foothold on the vast continent. During the escape, the dragon's blood dyed a mountain range blue. Countless sapphires were produced in the mountain range, and it became an important mineral mountain range of the Iron and Steel Ridge Kingdom, Blue Blood Mountain. Although the dragon did not die, the Sapphire Grand Duke I was seriously injured and had to withdraw from the continent, fleeing to the distant island to establish a country. Of course, this part of history was inferred by Liszt. In the night novel that praised the Sapphire family, the origin of Blue Blood Mountain was that the Sapphire Dragon had bitten the hostile White Iron Dragon of the Eagle Kingdom, and its blood dyed the mountain range. As for why the blood of the White Iron Dragon would create a mountain range that could be mined for sapphires, different people have different opinions. It was enough to fool ordinary people, there was no need to explain it so clearly. Knock knock knock. There was a knock on the door. Please come in. Liszt raised his head from a book called Guide to the Development of Fire attributed Qi. The one who came in was the castle's deputy butler, Silva, who was in his early 40s. He was Louis's deputy and the appointed successor of the family's butler. Young Master Liszt, your grandmother, Madame Penelope, has arrived. She is in the reception room, accompanied by young Master Levis and Miss Li Weiwei. Is grandmother here? I'll go over. Liszt rubbed his forehead, feeling a little annoyed. His grandmother did not like him. His father's disgust was more of his disappointment in him. Now that he had returned, his temperament had changed, and the Count no longer showed disgust. Obviously, he was happy with this change. But his grandmother was different. She did not like Liszt because Liszt reminded her of Melissa, her daughter-in-law. Penelope lived in a small castle in Coral City, and the reason why she did not live with her son was because of Melissa. The mother-in-law and daughter-in-law did not get along. Liszt, who was very much like his mother, became Penelope's punching bag. But no matter how annoyed he was, he still had to go downstairs to greet her. Grandmother, you have come. I am very relieved to see you in good health. Oh, look, who is here? The wrinkles on Penelope's face were already very thick. She was almost 60 years old. Liszt, if you didn't speak, I would have thought that Melissa had come to oppose me again. That beautiful face. Thank God, she has already gone to heaven to enjoy her life. Only then would an old woman like me dare to visit my son's castle. Without any expression on his face, Liszt sat down quietly without saying a word. The old lady did not like him, so why should he invite a snub? Anyway, they did not meet often, so it was fine to just treat them as strangers and maintain a superficial respect. Li Weiwei smiled and said, Liszt, when grandmother heard that you were back, she immediately rushed to the castle. Usually, at this time, she would pray for the family for a few hours. Penelope turned her head away from Liszt and whispered, I did not come here just to see him. Was this what it meant to be dishonorable? Liszt thought that Madame Penelope probably doted on her grandson. It was just that she habitually attacked Liszt, who looked like Melissa. It was a habit of more than 10 years. In fact, whether it was love or dislike, it did not matter. List just wanted to be a quiet, handsome man. According to your sister, the flower town looks more simple and crude than I imagined, just like a small village? Madame Penelope asked. It is indeed a bit simple and crude, but it is more suitable for development. I already have a plan to develop the flower town. Look, this majestic tone is a bit like our tulip family. Don't always imitate Melissa, who is neither impatient nor impatient, as if she was born to be superior to others. They already look alike enough, but if their temperaments are similar, it would really kill this old woman. It would be like a haze that I cannot shake off. Liszt did not respond. He did not have much of an impression of his mother, who died of illness when he was very young. Chapter 31. The past between Melissa and Madame Penelope was already an old story in the castle. Madame Penelope scolded Melissa, thinking that Melissa could not tolerate her. With the Marquis backing her, she could not afford to offend him and could only move out of Tulip Castle. Liszt, however, felt that Madame Penelope was too mean. More than 10 years had passed, yet she was still complaining endlessly. Moreover, in the past 10 years, Melissa had passed away, and Madame Penelope was still unable to move in because she was at odds with the new countess and her daughter-in-law. You are lucky to have come back today. The Baron's daughter is not in the castle, otherwise I would have been the first to turn around and leave. That woman has a smell that makes me uncomfortable, and your father cannot tolerate her. Now, the entire castle is filled with her smell, and I feel uncomfortable even if I stay here for a moment. Li Weiwei, who was sitting next to Madame Penelope, wrapped her arms around her, changed from her usual domineering manner, and said in a coquettish tone, "Grandmother, if you don't like Tulip Castle, you can come to my Falcon Town. I have a very beautiful manor and a hot spring there. You will definitely like it. My little girl, as a noble lady, you must sit properly. Look at you, you are already 19 years old this year, yet you still haven't found a satisfactory other half. You are not a lady enough. Grandmother is right, Li Weiwei, you have to learn to be a lady, and not ride horses and carry guns like us." Levis teased, then said to Madame Penelope, "Grandmother, if you think the castle smells bad, I can put more fragrance in it. This is not something that can be solved by fragrance. Having 2 women enter the house one after another has already exhausted me. I don't want to come to the castle if it is not necessary." Saying that, Madame Penelope turned her head and said to the butler, Louis, who was standing to the side, "Louis, you will help me pass on these words to the Baron's daughter, right?" It was very provocative. Louis smiled gently, "Madam, you know that I prefer to keep my mouth shut." Boring Louis, from young to old, you are always so boring. Ever since Madame Penelope entered the castle, the entire conversation revolved around her. Of course, 80% of the conversation was done by her. Liszt just smiled awkwardly but politely. It was not until the Count returned from outside and announced that the banquet was ready to begin that Liszt was freed from this awkward atmosphere. The banquet in Tulip Castle was obviously not comparable to the banquet in Flower Town's small castle. Just the number of people was incomparable. At tonight's banquet, almost all the nobles in the castle were seated, including the Count's family, his tutor, the knight captain, and a few of the Count's followers who were guests in the castle. There were a total of 16 nobles, including Lord, Knight, Baron, Viscount, and Count. At the banquet, with Madame Penelope around, there was naturally no awkward silence. They kept chatting at all times. Liszt concentrated on enjoying the food. Although he had never gotten used to the Western-style cuisine, but compared to the coarse food in Flower Town, the food here could be called delicious. He did not participate in the conversation much, and few people came to talk to him. Just like in the memory of his predecessor, he became invisible in the castle. However, before, he wanted to interrupt, but he could not. Now, he did not want to interrupt. After all, he was just a transmigrator who had reincarnated in a corpse. He could not integrate himself into the tulip family. He could only look at it calmly like a bystander, keep a low profile, do things in line with the times, and then immerse himself in development. Perhaps one day, there would be no need to keep a low profile, and he could do as he pleased. The day after the banquet, Liszt got up early because the three siblings had to go with the fleet to Red Crab Island to visit their sick grandfather, Marquis Merlin Longtaro. Send my sincere regards. The Count also got up early and enjoyed breakfast with his three children. As a son-in-law, he should have visited in person. However, his current identity was that of an ex-son-in-law, and his relationship with the Taro family was estranged. As such, it was inconvenient for him to visit. Madame Penelope had already returned from her stroll. She said in a bleak tone, "Levis, Li Weiwei, Liszt, send my regards to Marquis Merlin. In my memory, he was a handsome aristocrat with a strong and outstanding physique. I did not expect that after a few years, he would become so ill that he could not work, and even lose his position as the captain of the court fleet. Birth, aging, illness, and death are the rules of heaven and earth. Mother, you do not have to worry about it. Are you trying to tell me that I am also a damned old woman? Why do you think so? I am looking forward to you living for more than 100 years. From the two women you married, it can be seen that you have been looking forward to my death for a long time, so that you can be at peace. No one will disturb you from doing anything on the Coral Island." The Count could only smile awkwardly and politely. Liszt, together with Marcus, was followed by a castle serving man, who was responsible for carrying his luggage. After saying goodbye, the three siblings went to the wharf together. The wharf was part of the Coral City. Although it was called a city, Liszt was more willing to call it a large toilet. The streets and alleys were filled with the sour smell of fermented feces. Because of this, the tulip family produced a kind of tulip with a strong fragrance, which was widely popular among the citizens. Tulip flowers would be pinned on their chests to dilute the disgusting smell on the streets. Putting aside the smell of feces. A large city like the Coral City was not as majestic as a small county in Liszt's hometown. There were no tall buildings or mansions, only scattered wooden houses next to stone houses, spreading into the distance along the streets of varying width. There were all kinds of shops along the streets, and pedestrians in a hurry would inevitably step on all kinds of feces. The citizens always liked to dump their feces on the road. If it was a pile of dog shit, one could certainly choose to avoid it. But if it was a street full of dog shit, then the correct way was to step on it with a frown. As a result, layer upon layer of feces, after constant trampling, merged with the road surface, creating the city's unique feces road, which naturally carried a stench. Why was hygiene so poor? Because the civilians were busy with their livelihood and simply did not care about hygiene. The aristocrats lived in castles on the edge of the city and did not care about the dirtiness of the city. The only good thing was that the Coral City was just an island city with a limited population. The scale of the feces and urine produced was still tolerable under the constant weathering of nature. If it was a larger city, then perhaps the feces and urine could submerge the city. Could it be that the ability of the elves has limited my horizons and I can't think of using feces for farming? As Liszt looked at the Coral City, his imagination went wild. Maybe I can collect the feces on the island and take them all to the flower town. In the town, no, in the outskirts of the town, build a few methane ponds. He understood the principle of methane ponds, but it was a bit difficult to use methane for lighting and cooking. After simple fermentation, using it to fertilize the fields was the fastest way. The barren soil of the flower town was comparable to yellow soil, and it was really in urgent need of fertilizer. Chapter 32. The city was not worth looking forward to, only the castle was worth looking forward to. Aristocrats still paid attention to hygiene. There were bathrooms, toilets, and servants to transport excrement and garbage out of the castle. Because no one knew how to use excrement to fertilize the fields, they were randomly discarded in the wild and naturally weathered. The effective use of excrement to fertilize the fields could definitely reduce the dependence on the elves, only reduce, because the elves also had the ability to improve the characteristics of crops. The brig sailed on the blue sea. The coral city had gradually disappeared from sight, and the towering tulip castle on the top of the mountain had also begun to fall from the sea level. This seemed to prove that this world was also a sphere. Liszt occasionally thought about the world he had transmigrated into. What was the situation like in the end, but there was no information to infer any conclusions. "Sir, what are you looking at?" Marcus came over. "Looking at the sea, the blue sea, where countless treasures are hidden. I grew up by the sea, so I don't have such beautiful reveries about the sea. There are sea monsters in the sea, maybe some fish, but there are also fish in the rivers and lakes, which are not dangerous. The wealth of the continent is truly rich and inexhaustible. The glory of the knight and the aristocracy is also contested on the continent. The Grand Duchy of Sapphire was an archipelago, but it never gave up the conquest of the continent. Every few years, it would organize orders of chivalry to go to the continent to compete for minerals. It created a group of aristocrats. The Tulip family also made their fortune here. Marcus often dreamed of going to the continent to fight in the war, and being conferred the title of Lord Knight. Now that he was determined to serve Liszt, he would naturally bewitch Liszt from time to time. Liszt was still looking at the deep sea, not caring about the wealth of the continent. The battlefield was so dangerous, why would he go? It would be better to be a quiet country lord, do some tasks, farm, and take one step at a time steadily and surely. If it was just a simple transmigration, he didn't think he could stand out among the aborigines, but with the help of the smoke mission, becoming strong was just around the corner. As for what the smoke mission was, one day its secrets would be unraveled. "Teacher Marcus, I heard that outside of the archipelago of the Grand Duchy, there are still large unexplored islands?" "Yes, I've talked to some old sailors. There are still a lot of islands outside the archipelago, but those islands are deep in the sea and often have storms. There are also a lot of submerged reefs. It's difficult for ships to come and go, so there's no development value." Maybe. Liszt could not deny it. Putting everything else aside, as long as the distant fishing industry was developed, the wealth of the sea would be unveiled. At that time, the competition for islands would be no less than the competition for land. He couldn't do it now. He was just the lord of a small town in the countryside, so he had to focus on development first. Raise the sails. Sail forward. Raise the sails. Sail forward. The angry roars of the crew could be heard from below the mast. At this time, the south wind was blowing from the stern of the ship, making a flapping sound. The captain decisively ordered the sailors to raise the sails to get more wind. The emergence of sailboats allowed humans to enter larger seas. The Grand Duchy of Sapphire's fleet was mostly sailboats, but they all had horizontal sails. There were no schooners. The advantage of horizontal sails was that they were fast when the wind was with them, but the disadvantage was that they had almost no effect when the wind was against them. They needed to row. At this time, the wind was with them. The fleet raised their sails, forming a triangular formation on the sea. It was a spectacular sight. They set off in the morning and arrived at Red Crab Island in the evening. Red Crab Island was 10 times the size of Coral Island. Long Taro Castle was not on the coast, but halfway up the mountain range in the middle of the island. Therefore, after getting off the ship, Liszt and the others had to stay in the dock city of Sea Crab City for one night, and then change to carriages. After traveling for one day, they would arrive at Long Taro Castle on the third day. Pigeons had not yet been trained to send and receive letters, and the weight of thick bast paper was estimated to be too heavy for pigeons to carry. However, because a night had been arranged to deliver a letter, saying that the Tulip family would come to visit in the near future. Therefore, Longtaro Castle had arranged for servants to wait in the Sea Crab City's courtyard. After receiving Liszt and his party, they were immediately arranged to stay in the courtyard. They did not have to stay in the dirty city. After dinner at night, Liszt took a bath and lay in bed. He was a little seasick. In his hometown, he was used to taking planes and trains, but he was really not used to taking a boat. Fortunately, his predecessor was an islander, and his swimming ability was not bad, so he was able to slightly overcome it and not completely get seasick. As an islander, you are actually seasick. Liszt, I have to say that you are losing the face of the tulip family. I thought you had matured, but I didn't expect you to be so unbearable. Thinking of your previous cowardly behavior, it really is my stupid younger brother. Li Weiwei appeared in Liszt's room at some point. She did not knock on the door. This surprised Liszt, because he was observing his smoke serpentines. He often took them out to see if there were any new discoveries. But he soon settled down, because Li Weiwei did not seem to be able to see the smoke serpentines. Only Liszt could see them, so he did not have to worry about leaks. You forgot to knock on the door. I didn't knock, but it doesn't matter. Li Weiwei crossed her arms over her chest and stared at Liszt, expressing her disdain. It is very important to me. You did not respect my privacy, and in doing so, it is very unladylike. Aristocrats like ladylike ladies, dear sister. I don't need to change myself to please any aristocrat. Besides, Liszt, when did I need you to give me advice? If we weren't on Red Crab Island, would really teach you a lesson and let you understand that advancing to Earth Night is nothing. Liszt had been bullied by Li Weiwei since childhood. He believed that the root cause was that Li Weiwei was jealous of his appearance, handsome enough to make most women feel ashamed. You didn't come here just to tell me that I am still very weak, did you? I just wanted to see your ugly appearance when you get seasick. Since you have seen it, can you please go back? Li Weiwei fiercely glared at him, turned around, and walked away. Liszt got up and locked the door. The other party was 19 years old, and she was still a girl. Her behavior was really unfathomable. Liszt didn't care much. In his memory, Li Weiwei was such a careless, or rather, rash and frivolous person. The Count often lamented that he and Li Weiwei should change their temperaments. One was more graceful than a girl, and the other was more active than a boy. Lying down again, Liszt could not sleep and could only think about some boring things. 5 months ago, I came to Longtaro Castle as a New Year's Day visit. At that time, Marquis Merlin was not on the island and was still serving as the captain of the court fleet. I have not formally met him for about 4 or 5 years. Due to the aristocratic monogamy system, families were often not that prosperous. Marquis Merlin had 1 son and 2 daughters. The third daughter, Melissa, had already passed away, while the second daughter, Melinda, was married to the Marquis follower, Viscount Roland Pinecone of Long Surround Island. There was only one heir, the eldest son, Mesiro Longtaro, and Mesiro also had only one son, Miopol Longtaro. Cousin Miopol seems to be almost 25 years old, and still unmarried. It seems he is pursuing Sapphire Grand Duke's daughter. I heard that this princess of a small country is a social butterfly. Grand duchies were vassals of empires and kingdoms. The highest ruler was a Grand Duke. Strictly speaking, if one was not a king, one's daughter could not be called a princess. Moreover, the newly enthroned Sapphire Grand Duke, because he could not become a dragon knight, his title had already been demoted to Duke. In the aristocratic system, Prince, Grand Duke, and Duke were of the same level. However, only by becoming a knight could one be conferred the title of Prince or Grand Duke. Otherwise, one could only be conferred the title of Duke. However, rules were dead, while people were alive. Within the Grand Duchy of Sapphire, all the aristocrats addressed the ruler as Grand Duke. His daughter was naturally treated as a princess and sought after by people. Chapter 33. The jolting of the carriage made List drowsy. From Sea Crab City, they bumped their way to Redstone City. After spending the night in Redstone City, they waited until dawn. After a 2-hour drive, they finally saw the Longtaro Castle standing halfway up the mountain. The Longtaro Castle was almost 4 times the size of Tulip Castle. It had an arrow tower that was 100 or 200 meters tall. Because it was located halfway up the mountain, the castle was almost integrated with the mountain range. List had visited Neuschwanstein Castle in Europe when he was on his hometown Earth. The majesty of Neuschwanstein Castle was similar to that of Tulip Castle, except that it did not have the steep terrain of Tulip Castle, which was backed by a cliff. But compared to the Longtaro Castle in front of them, Neuschwanstein Castle appeared small. Just the Longtaro Castle alone had an imposing manner comparable to the White City in The Lord of the Rings. Below the castle was a city. The carriage did not need to pass through the city. It directly followed a slightly steep mountain road towards the castle. Halfway through the journey, the night squad of the Longtaro Castle discovered and welcomed them. Learning that they were relatives of the Tulip family, the night squad immediately escorted the carriage to the castle. The night squad rushed up the mountain to notify them in advance. Therefore, when the carriage arrived at the castle gate, the heir of the Longtaro Castle, the cousin of the 3 siblings, Meopal Longtaro, was already waiting with the servants. Levis, Li Weiwei, List. Meopal was a talented man with an elegant demeanor. His sapphire-like eyes were particularly beautiful. I received the letter and knew that you were coming. I have been waiting for a long time. Did everything go well on the road? List had to admit. This cousin, whether in appearance or temperament, was very outstanding, equally matched with him. Standing together, they looked more like a pair of brothers than Levis. Cousin Meopal, everything went well. Cousin, you have become more beautiful than last year. Thank you for your praise, cousin, but compared to your beautiful face, I feel that you are mocking me. Li Weiwei looked at Meopal and said half jokingly and half seriously. Meopal laughed. This isn't something I can refuse. What do you say, List? The latter half of his sentence was directed at List. List smiled. He finally confirmed that Li Weiwei had bullied him for so many years because she was jealous of his looks. Cousin is right. Sure enough, heroes have the same point of view. Let's go into the castle. Father is away in charge of this season's tax collection, so he hasn't returned yet. Grandpa is recuperating. He's very happy to hear that you've come. How is Grandpa? Meopal sighed. Grandfather's illness is a complication caused by the relapse of an old injury, sometimes good, sometimes bad. The Grand Duke has already dispatched an imperial physician to treat grandfather. I believe he will get better. In the gorgeous bedroom, on the bed sat the master of Red Crab Island, one of the 7 marquises of the Grand Duchy, the former captain of the court fleet, and the most distinguished person in Longtaro Castle. Merlin Longtaro. This was an old man over 70 years of age, with a pale, wrinkled face. Although he still had the dignity of living like a prince for a long time, he could no longer hide the weakness of old age and illness. Even the Sky Knight, who could soar in the sky in the past, could not withstand the carving of the knife of time. His sapphire blue eyes had already turned white, not to mention his white hair. He was quietly leaning against the headboard with a short tea table placed on top of the quilt. He was using a quill dipped in ink to strenuously write on a thick bast paper. The age spots on his face were particularly conspicuous. Young Master Merlin has already brought the 3 young masters and young ladies of the Tulip family into the castle. The butler, who was almost as old as Marquis Merlin, could not bear to disturb him and spoke in a particularly light tone. Marquis Merlin's quill slightly paused before continuing to write without raising his head. Melissa's children, then let them come and visit this old man with half a foot in the grave. Master, you are only temporarily ill and will soon recover. You said that you would live to be 100 years old and outlive the neighboring Marquis Wallace. I also threatened the Grand Duke Sapphire Dragon that I would kill it if it did not let me become the Dragon Lord. However, it was of no use. This time, I will definitely lose to that old fart. Marquis Merlin laughed heartily, quickly finished writing the last few words, and put down the quill. The servant waiting on the side immediately took the tea table away. The old butler supported the Marquis, leaned against the headboard, and sat steadily. Then, he leaned over and adjusted the red bow tie on the Marquis' chest. A servant brought in a bronze mirror. The other servants served the Marquis one after another, some with water, some with towels, and some with hairpins. The Marquis carefully groomed his image, quickly returning to his dignified appearance from that of an old man with one foot in the grave. Then, he waited. When he heard the familiar footsteps outside the door, his turbid eyes could not help but emit a glimmer of brilliance. He quickly hid it. Meopel, along with the three siblings, had already entered the bedroom. Levis took the lead and quickly walked to the bedside with Li Weiwei and List. He performed the etiquette of a junior to Marquis Merlin. "Grandfather, Li Weiwei, List, and I have come to visit you. Father also entrusted me to bring you his sincere greetings, hoping that you will recover immediately and restore the graceful bearing of the Longtaro Castle's master. Your father is considerate." The Marquis nodded lightly. Was the journey smooth? It was smooth. That's good. Since you have come to visit grandfather, then stay in the Longtaro Castle for a few more days. Yes, grandfather. The Marquis gazed past Levis and Li Weiwei before landing on List. There was a look of nostalgia in his eyes. "List, you have come of age." "Yes, this year's 9th of March is my coming-of-age ceremony." "I heard that your father enfeoffed you as Baron. Which town is it in?" "Flower Town." Not even a Viscount. It seems that Li William is a failure as a count." Marquis Merlin gave a very impolite evaluation. His tone once again became emotional. "I did not witness your coming-of-age ceremony. Melissa will definitely blame me. Seeing you is like seeing Melissa standing in front of me." Meopel echoed, "Grandfather, Cousin List is really too similar to Aunt Melissa. When I saw Aunt Melissa when I was a child, I felt that the Longtaro flower was the most dazzling flower in the Grand Duchy. I can no longer remember what Mother looked like. I can only admire her from the portrait in Tulip Castle," said List. His predecessor really did not have any memories of his mother. When List was 2 years old, Melissa had already died. What memories could a 2-year-old have? There were portraits of Melissa in the castle, but he did not often see them. Moreover, even if there were portraits, they were highly distorted, making it difficult to display the graceful bearing of the real person. It was a pity. Chapter 34. Chirp. Chirp. On the corridor of the castle, there was a strange cry. List, who was going to rest until noon and then attend the luncheon, opened the door and saw that not far away, a blue sprite was flying around the pillars of the corridor. Several maids were serving the sprite. As if it had discovered List, the sprite flew over and hovered 1 meter in front of List. Its big eyes curiously looked at List, and from time to time, it made a chirp sound, but no one knew what it said. "Young Master List." The maids followed and greeted him respectfully. List asked, "What kind of sprite is this?" "It's a pachyphyte sprite. It's only been born for 3 years, a pretty maid replied, her brown eyes darting a few glances at List. There was an inexplicable heat in her eyes. List didn't notice that the other party was looking at him. He stretched out his hand and pointed at the pachyphyte sprite. "Does it have a name?" The sprite tilted its head and didn't understand. "Chirp?" The maid replied, "No name, there are many sprites in the castle, you just need to call it worm grass. However, the pachyphyte sprite is the most naughty of all sprites, so we need several maids to follow it to prevent it from causing trouble. Sprites are a magical species bred by nature, most of them are very docile, but there are always some who are more tricky and eccentric. What kind of trouble can it cause? List felt that it was making a fuss. One sprite and one maid should be enough, but there were several maids following it. It was a bit suspicious. But without waiting for the maids to explain, the hovering sprite suddenly pursed its mouth at List, and then, splat, a mouthful of saliva was spat on List's face. It was too sudden, and the Earth Knight didn't have the slightest time to react. By the time List came back to his senses, the little elf had already flown into the distance while laughing. Young Master List, the Pachyphyte sprite is very naughty and often spits at the castle's guests. I'm very sorry, I hope you don't mind. The maid with a fiery gaze turned around and said to her companions, quickly follow the Pachyphyll, don't let it disturb others. I'll take young Master List to wash his face. Young Master List, please allow me to fetch some water for you to wash your face as an apology for the behavior of the Pachyphyllum sprite. All right. List just wanted to wipe it off. The sprite wasn't a dirty creature, so he didn't mind its saliva. However, since the maid said so, he would just fetch some water to wash his face. The maid wrung the towel dry and was about to wipe List's face. Thanks, I'll do it myself. This is what we maids are supposed to do. For things like washing my face, I'm used to doing it myself. List coughed. Although he understood that the upper class was very comfortable and had servants to serve them, he would never get used to it. After wiping his face, he handed the towel to the maid. The maid's eyes lit up. Do you want me to wipe it again? No need. A disappointed look flashed across her face. The maid picked up the basin and got up to leave. Then I'll go down first. By the way, young Master List, my name is Anna. If you need anything, I'm very willing to serve you. List smiled slightly. Okay, Anna. At that moment, there was still a strand of wet hair on his forehead, which made him look even more handsome. The maid was obviously shaken by List, then she lowered her head and quickly left the room. She walked out of the room. Only then did she feel that her chest was thumping and her cheeks were blushing slightly. What are you doing? She suddenly heard a questioning voice in her ear. It was a valet, the valet arranged for List by the castle. He was responsible for List's daily life during this time. He had just gone to the kitchen to get some milk tea for List. When he came back, he saw Anna coming out of the room with a basin in her hand. The work of serving the guests was his. Young Master List needs to wash his face, so I'm serving him. Is that so? This kind of thing doesn't seem to be done by you maids. Anna, don't do anything that will make Longtaro Castle lose face. The valet said in a low voice. Anna's footsteps did not stop. Leshy, you are not the housekeeper, what I do is none of your business. Then I'll tell the housekeeper. I'm just doing my job. How you want to sue me is your business. When Anna had completely disappeared around the corner of the corridor, Leshy coldly snorted, a bunch of little bitches. After cursing, he quickly withdrew his angry expression and put on the dignified and appropriate demeanor that a valet should have, as well as a calm and elegant expression. He knocked on the door. Young Master List, I have brought you the milk tea you wanted. Please come in. Anna returned to the team that was looking after the Pachyphyllum sprites. The maids immediately asked, Anna, did you touch young Master List's face? Is young Master List's face particularly smooth and delicate? Did you blush and your heart beat faster at that time? He is as handsome as young Master List. A few years ago, Lucy touched young Master List's face when he was washing his face. But at that time, he was not yet an adult, but he was already so handsome. Anna shook her head and said with disappointment, No, young Master List washes his face by himself. He doesn't like maids to wash his face for him. How can that be? Could it be that he, also likes men like Viscount Orpheus? Probably not. I saw young Master List last year. He was staring at Sister Luya's butt. Sister Luya's butt is indeed beautiful. I'm jealous. Then you need to pat it every day, otherwise you won't have a butt at all. By the way, young Master List is already an adult, he should have been in theft. What is his title now? I think it's a Viscount. I heard that the Tulip family's Coral Island is also a large island. I don't know, if Miss Melissa was still alive, with Master as her backing, she would definitely be in theft as a Viscount. But the Earl of Coral Island has already married a new Countess, young Master List's situation should be rather awkward. I really want to comfort him. Stop daydreaming, do you need a maid like you to worry about the affairs of the nobles? I advise you all to calm down and do your job as maids with peace of mind. An ugly duckling will not become a white swan, the descendants of ducks will only be ducks, and the descendants of swans will be swans. So what, I've already decided to be like Mrs. Feeney, never marry for the rest of my life, you still don't allow me to create a romantic encounter for myself? Chapter 35. List did not know what the maid was thinking. He had never thought of being like the majority of aristocrats, irresponsibly messing around in other people's castles. His current body was only 16 years old and had just reached adulthood. According to the laws of his hometown, 18 years old was considered an adult and 22 years old could be married. Right now, his body was at ease and there was no need to think too much as it would damage his energy. His predecessor was a good-for-nothing, but the current List was very confident in becoming a Sky Knight. After all, his perception was not bad and he had the help of the smoke mission. Maybe in the future, he could ride a dragon and become a Dragon Knight. The world's top fighting force was the Dragon Knight, an existence that could easily destroy heaven and earth. The cultivation of fiery dragon drill and fire surge fluctuations cannot stop. Although I can avoid going to the battlefield, the ability to protect myself must always be cultivated. The luncheon was a family banquet in the Longtaro Castle, and there were not many people. Masiro and his wife were in charge of tax collection in other places. In the castle, there were only two masters, the grandfather and the grandson. According to the rules of the Longtaro Castle, the knight captain did not eat in the castle, and Miopol's tutor had gone to the city to become an official. Therefore, there were only the grandfather and grandson, as well as the three siblings sitting around the table. Marquis Merlin was in a wheelchair, so it was inconvenient for him to walk. The food in the castle was a grade higher than that in the Tulip Castle. The bread on the plate was proof of this. It was the best white bread. List picked up a piece of white bread and took a bite. It was soft and fragrant, and had a wonderful texture that melted in the mouth. It was almost not like bread, but cake. The wine was the red wine from the cellar of the Razy Manor, which was a grade higher than the Crescent red wine. As the plates were opened, roast beef pudding, salmon in golden sauce, cooked eggs, frozen rock lobster with mayonnaise, roast goose with lettuce salad, meat pie with cheese, asparagus leaves, and trout in lobster sauce, the sumptuousness was comparable to that of a major festival banquet in the Tulip Castle. However, although the dishes were plentiful, the atmosphere was rather stiff. The Marquis was a serious person and had been in charge of the navy. It could be said that he had a strong aura. In front of the Marquis, Levis and Li Weiwei couldn't be at ease and spoke cautiously. List was also somewhat restrained. Mentally, he did not think that a group of ancient people was anything special, but in reality, he could not be calm when he was with strangers. Therefore, it was more important to try to eat something delicious. Especially the frozen rock lobster with mayonnaise. It was very delicious. He had already finished one plate, so he ordered another. Rock lobsters are produced in the waters of Red Crab Island. My family's fleet rarely goes out to sea to catch them. It's mostly fishermen who risk their lives to catch them. The production is not high, and almost all of them are sent to the castle. Miopol nibbled on the bread and said, "If you like it, I will have someone prepare a batch of live prawns for you. I am afraid that it is not easy to transport. The distance from the Longtaro Castle to my flower town is too far. I need to walk half a day on the Red Crab Island, take a boat for a day, and then walk half a day to the flower town. Including accommodation and other delays, it will take at least 5 days to return. Actually, rock lobsters are very easy to raise. As long as you give them some water every day, they won't die easily since they have the bloodline of the sea monster, the ornate lobster. Sea monsters were the World of Warcraft of the sea. List naturally did not object. Thank you very much. You are welcome. Meople smiled. Among the 3 siblings of the tulip family, he was closer to List. It was probably because of their mutual admiration for each other, or because birds of a feather flock together. Handsome people would always be friends with other handsome people. When the Marquis heard the conversation between the two, he suddenly said, "List, tell me about the flower town." "Grandfather, life in the flower town is, in fact, mediocre. The local customs, the living environment, they can all be talked about. It is a small town with less than 2,000 people. In the beginning, a new tulip was discovered. Therefore, father migrated his subjects and built the flower town. Now, wheat is mainly planted. The land is relatively barren and the taxes are very low. Fortunately, a new type of tulip magic ingredient has grown in the town, which can bring about new development. A new type of magic ingredient, this is a good thing." The Marquis asked, "Did Tulip Castle pay a large amount of gold coins for this magic ingredient?" "It is a division. The town cannot grow too much. I reached an agreement with my brother and sister to grow it together. However, they have to give me 30% of the profits." "Oh, it is a very interesting cooperation. It is far more valuable than gold coins. List, you have not only inherited Melissa's beauty, but also the shrewdness of the Taro family." The shrewdness of the Taro family was very famous in the Grand Duchy. The reason for this was that the Marquis father, who was the previous Marquis, was just a count at that time. Because the Grand Duchy was preparing to go to the continent to compete for minerals, it was in urgent need of funds to arm the orders of chivalry. Therefore, the Count spent all of his family's wealth to support the Sapphire Grand Duke's actions, ultimately obtaining the Red Crab Island and the position of Marquis. Now, the annual income of the Red Crab Island was probably more than what the Count had spent all of his family's wealth. It was a good deal. The flower town is just a small town. I need to make money in order to maintain the castle's expenses. Self-reliance, these are the qualities of a qualified aristocrat. Courage, courtesy, loyalty, self-reliance. There were a lot of qualities that aristocrats often talked about. Among them, the most unworthy of the name was self-reliance. They were basically a group of vampires who squeezed ordinary people dry. From childhood to adulthood, they probably didn't even know what a hoe looked like. Of course, the self-reliance that the Marquis spoke of probably meant that they could rely on themselves to squeeze, instead of asking for help from their family. After the luncheon was the banquet. After the banquet, there was a rest. The next day, there was another luncheon. After the luncheon, Meople got busy. According to the Marquis' instructions, he planned to hold a grand ball that evening, summoning the young aristocrats from the nearby towns. An aristocratic ball could be simply regarded as a blind date. In particular, the second and third sons of aristocrats were most keen on participating in this kind of ball. The eldest son could inherit his father's title and didn't have to worry about not being able to find a marriage partner. The second and third sons, on the other hand, needed to work hard and strive to marry a fair-skinned, rich and beautiful woman so that they could continue to enjoy the aristocratic life. Otherwise, generation after generation, they would eventually be reduced to ordinary knight and fall out of the aristocratic class. Female aristocrats were also keen on balls. Not every young lady could marry the eldest son of an aristocrat. They also needed to target those aristocratic descendants with potential and develop their charm. List, you need to prepare. Meople brought over a pile of formal clothes with his valet. These are formal clothes that I have never worn before. Our stature is about the same, so they will definitely suit you. Cousin, there is no need to try them one by one. I think the one I am wearing is very good. No, you must strive for perfection. Think about it. Yesterday, I arranged for a night to quickly send out a notice. At least 13 aristocrats from small towns have received invitations and can rush over to participate in the ball. How many beautiful young ladies are waiting to form a good marriage with you and achieve a beautiful encounter? I am still young, I am not in a hurry to get married. Liszt was a bit speechless. How come he didn't discover that this cousin of his was so keen on matchmaking? You should dress up my elder sister, she is at the marriageable age. There is also my elder brother, he also needs to find a suitable mistress candidate for Tulip Castle. They don't need me to remind them. Levis has already borrowed a lot of formal clothes, and Li Weiwei has been dressing up since morning. Didn't you notice? Is that so? Chapter 36. A close-fitting swallow-tailed coat, wavy hair, and the bright powder that he was forced to apply on his face, the freshly baked Liszt was dazzling. Perfect. Miopal patted Liszt's shoulder. You will be the focus of all the men at tonight's ball. I have no such intention. Maybe in a few years, I will be very enthusiastic. Right now, I am sorry, cousin, but I do not intend to get to know any aristocratic ladies. If you don't mean what you say, I won't believe it. Don't worry, Liszt. The best thing in life is to meet the right person at the right time. Don't say let nature take its course, you have to seize the opportunity. Cousin, is this the reason why you have been unmarried for so many years? Don't change the topic to me, we are now talking about you. Liszt shook his cuffs. Miopal was very good to him. In fact, he wanted to tell his cousin that instead of chasing after the Sapphire Grand Duke's daughter, which might cause the Taro family to be thrown out of the cage, it would be better to find a female aristocrat and marry her. However, when the words were on the tip of his tongue, he swallowed them back. This situation definitely had the will of the Marquis. The Taro family boasted of their shrewdness, and it was possible that they wanted to go a step further. Once they married the Sapphire Grand Duke's daughter, the family's status would be unshakable. As a rural baron of a small town, it was better for him not to eat coarse bread and worry about the Marquis. After dressing up gorgeously, he followed Miopal to the hall where the ball was about to be held. There were already aristocrats in 2s and 3s who had arrived and were chatting in the hall while enjoying the wine prepared by the servants. Sir Miopal, you are finally willing to come out? An aristocrat walked over with a wine glass. It is not yet time for the ball, no need to be anxious, Martyr. Martyr looked at Liszt. This is my cousin, his father is the Earl of Coral Island. So it turns out to be the Tulip family. Nice to meet you, I am Martyr Crossbow. Liszt Tulip. Liszt maintained a polite smile, but it was not very enthusiastic. He was not a sociable noble, so he had no choice but to attend this ball. But then, he could only helplessly endure. Under Miopal's introduction, he got to know the young aristocrats of Red Crab Island. Basically, they were followers of the Taro family. Nobles enfeoffed by the Marquis were completely loyal to the Marquis. The interesting thing about the aristocracy was this. The nobles enfeoffed by the king were the retainers of the king, and the lesser nobles enfeoffed by the nobles were the retainers of the nobles. However, the minor nobles who were enfeoffed by the nobles were not the king's retainers and did not have to swear loyalty to the king. For example, Lee William, the Earl of Coral Island, was a noble enfeoffed by the king. He was the king's retainer, but Liszt was not. He only needed to be loyal to his father. After his father passed away, he would have to pledge his loyalty to his elder brother, Levis. Is there a beautiful young lady you fancy? If there is, tell me, I can help you pull some strings. Don't be restrained. After greeting the guests, Miopal returned to Liszt's side. Look at your brother. He has completely adapted to the scene of the ball and has already hooked up with the daughters of 3 viscounts. Following his gaze, one could see the average-looking Levis saying something that made a young lady laugh heartily. There is also your elder sister. Someone is also trying to curry favor with him. On Li Weiwei's side, there were two male aristocrats chatting and laughing with her. She could not be considered beautiful, but with a little inquiry, one could find out that Li Weiwei had the title of Baron. For those lord knight or aristocrats who were unable to inherit their family's title, she was an excellent marriage partner. After getting married, they could continue to enjoy their aristocratic status. List raised the fruit wine in his hand and clinked it with Meoples. I hope they can find happiness soon. As for me, cousin, you really don't have to worry about me. Really? Really? Alright, but I will still help you keep an eye out for suitable young ladies. There is no need for that. List was speechless. This cousin of his was too much. Was he so keen on being a matchmaker? Meoples shrugged his shoulders slightly and whispered to him, in fact, this is Grandpa's intention. He knows that you are not valued in the Tulip family and hopes that you can come to Red Crab Island. Besides, I also need helpers. The Taro family is not very prosperous and I have no brothers or sisters. You know, I really hope that you can come. List felt that Meoples was speaking from the bottom of his heart. According to his conversion of units of measurement, the Coral Island was equivalent to a prefecture-level city, about 10,000 square kilometers. The Red Crab Island was 10 times the size of the Coral Island, about 100,000 square kilometers. The area was equivalent to the area of the provinces of Jiangsu and Zhejiang. There were no roads, and transportation depended on horses. The larger the area, the more difficult it was to manage. Moreover, the aristocracy was not a centralized way of power. The more minor aristocrats were in theft, the more chaotic the management of the territory would be, and even the foundation of the ruling family would be shaken. After thinking about it, it would be a lie to say that he was not tempted. The flower town was a remote and desolate place, and it really did not have much development value. If he came to Red Crab Island to develop, the Taro family would at least raise his status by a rank, Viscount, which would allow him to have a small city as a fief. However, to rely on a woman to achieve this goal, List was very resistant. Let nature take its course, cousin. If there is someone I like, I will not miss it. If there is something I don't like, then don't force me. All right. At nightfall, the dance party began. Soothing piano music came from the fingertips of a pianist, creating a suitable atmosphere for the dance party. As the host, Meoples and a viscount's daughter danced the first opening dance, and then retreated, indicating that everyone was free to partner up. Sitting in a corner, List watched the young men and women dance gracefully on the dance floor. There was no action. He had already sized up all the women participating in the dance party. Tall, short, fat, thin, beautiful, and ugly. Unfortunately, there was no woman who could move his heart. Even though there were a few mature women who conformed to his aesthetic standards, but age was an obstacle. After all, he was only 16 years old. At this age, many aristocrats had already begun to be dissolute. However, he was still not at the marriageable age. Only when men reached 20 and women reached 18 would it be the restless season for marriage. His gaze passed through the crowd and fell on an unknown place in the void. Then, after a moment, an invisible smoke gradually appeared, forming distorted serpentines. Mission: not only cows like to eat fresh and tender alfalfa, horses also like to eat it. This is the foundation for establishing a horse farm, as well as the starting point for establishing a career. Please help the alfalfa sprite worm settle down its worm stalk. Reward: 3 wild corn stalks. The mission had already existed for several days, so he was somewhat anxious. After being delayed for several days, the alfalfa grass should have already grown. When I return, should be able to settle down the alfalfa sprite worm. Ah, wild corn, I don't know what it looks like, but its output should be at least several times that of wheat. Just as he was thinking about the mission, Suddenly, he heard a pleasant voice like that of an oriole. "Hey, Liszt, can I sit here?" The smoke suddenly dissipated. Liszt recovered and saw a 17 or 18-year-old girl. She looked a bit like the second daughter of the Count, Edith, from Downton Abbey. She had wavy flaxen hair, a sharp nose, deep eye sockets, and thin lips that seemed to be smiling. It was very standard, more than 8 out of 10. Miopol had previously introduced her to him. She was the youngest daughter of a viscount, called Athena Salmon. Her family was famous for producing salmon. Chapter 37. I didn't see you dance, so why didn't you go? Athena asked while taking a sip of juice. I'm not very skilled in dancing, so I just quietly appreciate other people's dances. Then you should go down and dance. The dance steps are very simple. You can learn them after a few times. Blinking her eyes, Athena had an expectant look on her face. If you want to learn, I can teach you. Since the lady took the initiative, Liszt couldn't refuse. He could only stand up and extend his hand. Can I ask you to dance? It would be my honor. Athena extended her hand to Liszt and stood up. In this way, Liszt took Athena to the dance floor. Accompanied by soothing piano music, he put his arm around Athena's waist, held her left hand, and began to dance together on the dance floor. The aristocratic ballroom dances had always been very simple. Liszt himself had never danced, but his predecessor had considerable experience. Your dance is not jerky. It seems that you were deceiving me just now. Athena said with a smile as she danced. Perhaps it is because I am performing exceptionally. Is that so? Then I believe you. After a moment of silence, Athena asked again, I have never been to Coral Island. In fact, I have never left Red Crab Island. Is Coral Island very far from Red Crab Island? It is not far. It is a voyage of more than half a day. If the wind is favorable all the way, then it may take half a day. What does Tulip Castle look like? It is built on a cliff on the shore. It is much smaller than Longtaro Castle. However, the surrounding hillsides are covered with tulip. It must be very beautiful. If there is a chance, I would like to visit Tulip Castle. There will be a chance. Do you live in Tulip Castle? I grew up there. However, I have now gone to live in my own town. Yes, I heard from Sir Miopol that you have been enfeoffed as Baron in Flower Town. Yes. There must be a lot of beautiful flowers there. Is the castle where you live also surrounded by flowers? I'm afraid I'll have to disappoint you. There's only a dozen or so mu of tulip. The rest of the land is planted with wheat. As for the surroundings of the castle, I'm preparing to plant grass, build a horse farm, and maybe raise some cows. Liszt said indifferently. He had a feeling that Athena was inquiring about his situation. Perhaps this girl was attracted by his handsome appearance and wanted to become Baron Liszt's wife? It was better to interrupt her thoughts as soon as possible. After a pause, he continued, well, the location of the town is very remote. There is not enough wheat to eat, milk to drink, and even vegetables to eat often. Even if you have gold coins, it is difficult to buy meat. Because it's separated by a mountain ridge, and there's World of Warcraft in the mountain ridge, merchants aren't willing to enter. Athena opened her mouth in surprise. Are you Earth Knight? I just advanced recently, and I'm still familiarizing myself with the Do-Chi's secret manual. Liszt, who was 1.8 meters tall, lowered his head and saw that Athena, who was 1.6 meters tall at most, had a slightly stiff expression on her face. It was probably the gap between ideals and reality that had troubled her. Anyone who saw Liszt for the first time would definitely have a good impression of him. Of course, it was mainly women. But after understanding Liszt's background, it was likely that he would have to retreat. He was not valued, was poor, and was a baron from a remote town. His aptitude for qi was also not good. Sooner or later, he would have to sell his fief and wander under another lord. Managing a fief was not a simple matter. Many small aristocrats would go bankrupt and fall to the point of becoming tutors or knight captains. Gort was one of them. Even great aristocrats would go bankrupt and lose their fief if they did not manage their business well. Next, it's probably time to let go, indicating the end of the dance. Liszt thought. However, Athena did not loosen her grip. Her slightly stiff expression quickly reverted to her previous faint smile. Your father, the Count of Coral Island, would not turn a blind eye to the flower town, right? My relationship with my father is not too harmonious, maybe because my brother and sister are too outstanding. But I feel that your temperament is more outstanding. When you stand together with Sir Meopel, you look like a pair of brothers. I am more like my mother. Your mother must have been a graceful and luxurious aristocratic madam. I actually don't remember what she looked like. She passed away when I was 2 years old. Sorry, I shouldn't have mentioned it. It doesn't matter. Next, the two of them did not speak. With their arms around each other's waist, they finished the dance. During the break, Liszt returned to his seat. He did not expect Athena to follow him. Then she sat next to him and still tried to find something to talk about. My family is in Whitefish City. The castle has no name. I also have a brother. He is married to Sister Lydia of Viscount Xavier's family. They met at a ball in Longtaro Castle last year. Oh, no wonder I didn't see your brother come today. Liszt was somewhat perfunctory. He and Sister Lydia have a very good relationship and rarely participate in this kind of social ball. Athena blinked. My father is very hospitable. Liszt, if you have time, you can come to my house as a guest. I'm afraid I don't have time. Grandfather is still recovering. I have to return to Coral Island tomorrow. When will you come again? At New Year's Day. Oh. The piano music sounded again, and Liszt and Athena danced again. Then, with the excuse that the dance floor was too stuffy, he refused Athena's hope of continuing to dance with him. When he came back from the castle, the ball was already coming to an end. As the music stopped, Meopel, representing the host, announced that the ball was over. The aristocrats in 2s and 3s directly returned by carriage. As for those who were far away, they were led by servants to the rooms arranged by the castle. Liszt was also ready to return to his room. Athena came over again and only said, "Good night, Liszt." "Good night, Athena." Before returning to his room, Meopel came over. "Liszt, did you have a good chat with Athena?" "Just 2 dances. I can see that Athena is very interested in you. What do you think?" "I don't think so." Seeing that Liszt was serious, Meopel nodded. "Well, I understand. Have a good rest." "Right, tomorrow, grandfather said that he will give you a coming-of-age gift. It's a pity that he didn't witness your coming-of-age ceremony. He hopes to make up for it a little. Grandfather is too polite." "Well, good night." "Good night." Late at night, Liszt was still awake. He repeatedly thought about the coming-of-age gift the Marquis was going to give him. With the Marquis taking action, it shouldn't be too bad. Maybe it's a magic sword? Among aristocrats, especially the gifts from the elders to the younger generation, most of them were weapons, implying that the glory of a knight needed to be won with a sharp blade and a spear. For the Marquis to give a weapon, it should at least be a magic weapon. Magic weapons were very precious, and he had never owned one before. Therefore, the more he thought about it, the more excited he became. The more he thought about it, the more enthusiastic Athena was. Both inside and outside revealed that she liked Liszt and wanted to be the Baron's wife. She was liked, and she was a beautiful lady. Chapter 38. Early the next morning, Liszt, who had slightly dark circles under his eyes, had already packed his luggage. He also enjoyed a breakfast in his room: bread, fried eggs, shortbread, jam, milk, honey, and coffee. After Levis and Li Weiwei had also packed their things, the three siblings were ready to bid farewell to the Marquis. The Marquis got up early and was sitting in his wheelchair, writing something. "Did you sleep well?" The Marquis stopped writing, raised his head, and looked at the three tall siblings. "I heard that you had a good time at last night's ball?" Levis replied with a smile, "It was a very comfortable night, grandfather. The ball hosted by cousin made us very happy, and we got to know a lot of aristocratic ladies. I was moved by some of the beautiful ladies." "That's good. Take advantage of the fact that you are young and moved." After exchanging a few words, the three siblings said their goodbyes. The Marquis did not urge them to stay. He just said to Liszt, "I was not able to witness your coming-of-age ceremony. To make up for this regret, I will give you a gift. Miopal, bring the prepared gift and give it to Liszt." Miopal soon came in with a long box in his hands. When Liszt saw the box, he immediately understood that his guess was correct. The gift from the Marquis was indeed what the elders liked to give to the younger generation: a weapon. What kind of magic weapon will it be? Liszt was somewhat impatient. Miopal handed over the box. "Liszt, grandfather will give you this red blood sword. I hope you can use it to cut through the thorns and blossom with the dazzling brilliance of a knight." Red blood sword? Liszt opened the box. Suddenly, a bright, snow-white knight two-handed sword entered his eyes. The slender blade, the slender crossguard, and the slender hilt looked just like a German two-handed sword. At the intersection of the sword guard and the sword hilt, there was a fiery red gemstone embedded in it. Just by looking at it, one could feel the magic power emitted by the fiery red gem circulating ceaselessly throughout the entire sword. It could even be seen that there were tiny red marks that looked like blood vessels appearing on the blade. No wonder it was called red blood sword despite being snow-white. Most importantly, it was not a magic weapon, but a gem weapon that was better than magic weapons. Ruby? When Li Weiwei saw the ruby on the crossguard and hilt, she was immediately shocked. At the same time, her eyes were filled with envy and jealousy. An ordinary magic weapon was worth about 100 gold coins. However, a gemstone weapon was worth thousands of gold coins, and it was a magic weapon that was 10 times the price. Just this red blood sword alone was estimated to be worth several years of taxes of a wealthy town. Her Falcon town was more or less a wealthy town. After a few years of living frugally, it was barely enough for her to buy a gemstone weapon. However, it was impossible for her to give up her luxurious lifestyle, so it was very likely that she would never be able to afford it. Her heart was filled with jealousy, and with her straightforward personality, she immediately said, "Grandfather, you are too biased towards Liszt. You only gave me a set of clothes as my coming-of-age present. For your coming-of-age ceremony, didn't the Coral Islands boy give you a lesser sprite and also confer you the title of Baron? But Liszt can't enjoy it. The Coral Islands boy is allowed to be biased, but I'm not allowed to be biased." The Marquis spoke in a matter-of-fact tone. At the same time, he revealed his dissatisfaction with the Earl of Coral Island. Liszt immediately showed off, "Thank you for the gift, grandfather. I will treat the red blood sword well and not let its brilliance be covered in dust." If he sold a gemstone weapon, he could immediately get 1,000 or 2,000 gold coins. Of course, he would not sell it. The ruby embedded in the red blood sword clearly had the attribute of fire. It could assist him in his training. This was more effective than using magic ingredients to assist his training. Products of dragons were bound to be fine. With the red blood sword in hand, Liszt, under the watchful eyes of Miopal and a large group of servants, prepared to return. His short 2-day stay as a guest in the Longtaro castle was over. He was not too reluctant to leave. After all, there were still a lot of things waiting for him in the flower town. Gold or silver nests were not as good as his doghouse. Just as he was about to board the carriage, someone suddenly shouted, "Liszt, wait. He looked back and saw Athena. Good morning, Miss Athena. Good morning. Athena was slightly out of breath. She had probably run over from the castle. Are you going back? Yes. Levis, who had boarded the carriage, suddenly interjected, if there is a beautiful girl looking forward to me, then I would rather not go back. Liszt turned around and glared at him. Brother, please get on the carriage. Levis shrugged. Miss Athena, you two talk. Thank you, Sir Levis. Leaving Liszt and Athena alone, Athena grasped the corner of her clothes. Aren't you going to stay for a few more days? There are a lot of things waiting for me to deal with in the town. Will you come to White City as a guest? Her eyes were full of expectation. Liszt smiled and refused. Sorry, I have no reason to visit your family. I don't know your father, and I don't have any connections. There was always a reason for the communication between aristocrats. One could not visit for no reason. You can come and find me. When Athena finished speaking, she lowered her head. The meaning was clear, an unmarried man and an unmarried woman. There was only one kind of relationship between them. Liszt secretly sighed. He felt that his next words might hurt the lovely little girl's heart, but he had to say it. Miss Athena, thank you for your love, but I have not considered the possibility between us. Please do not worry about me. You are so beautiful, there must be many people better than me pursuing you. Athena's eyes quickly dimmed, but soon she was full of smiles again. Thank you for your frankness, Sir Liszt, I wish you a pleasant journey. Thank you, take care, Liszt said and turned to enter the carriage. The coachman raised his whip, and the horse pulled the carriage, galloping quickly down the mountain. There was no dust on the gravel road, only the clanking of the wheels. Liszt, you're so cruel to reject a noble lady's love just like that. Li Weiwei showed an indescribable emotion, probably doubtful that her weak brother could refuse someone else. I don't feel anything. Why do I force myself and harm others? He looked back through the window and saw Athena still standing at the castle gate in the distance. The clothes that wrapped around her petite and exquisite body swayed gently in the wind. She was courageous, but he could not accept it. He wanted to be sentimental for 10 minutes. But Li Weiwei's cold snort interrupted the atmosphere. There is no need for feelings in a noble marriage. There is no need? Then why don't you just marry someone with good conditions? Because I don't want to be a vassal. Even if I want to marry, the groom must come to Falcon Town. Or, they have the charm to let me give up Falcon Town and live in their castle. If I really meet such a person, why can't I give up my body and mind? Li Weiwei said arrogantly. Liszt did not say anything. A moment later, Li Weiwei stretched out her hand. Let me see the red blood sword. Waving the exquisitely crafted red blood sword and the ruby that was brimming with magic, Li Weiwei could not hide her jealousy. Why does grandfather treat you so well? I might not be able to use a gemstone sword in my entire life. Liszt, it is too wasteful for you to use it. Give it to me, I can give you 100 Neldas. You're tuning into the Xiaofan's Wuxia Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.